This podcast contains detailed plot spoilers, adult language, and mature themes. Listener discretion is advised.
Okay, let's do it.
'89, the end of the 80s. While always a mixed bag, the decade was for many a golden age of Hollywood. The 90s would bring larger budgets, science fiction would take off with further advancements of CGI, but traditional action movies would soon take a backseat to the new craze of superhero movies, or dumbed-down remakes and even worse sequels. Welcome to a podcast of Rare Antiquities, episode 28. Today we review what is literally the last action movie of the 80s, as we talk about Sylvester Stallone and Kurt Russell in Tango and Cash. My name is Harry, and I'll be your host for today's show.
And my name is Geoff. I will be your co-host for today's show.
And I'm Nathan, and I'm crashing this party.
The 80s. I just want to first look at the 80s on a high level here. Let's just talk about your memories of the 80s, as that was pretty much our generation as we grew up during that time. Just with respect to film, how can you best describe the 80s for each of you? Because it means so many different things to different people. Geoff, how about you start first?
Wow, that's a pretty big question.
Yeah, you don't have to go too deep.
I guess it kind of runs the gamut of everything. I mean, the golden age of the action film, some of the great science fiction films, Star Wars, I mean, you name it. The 80s has it all. It certainly has a lot of stinkers as well. So I guess you could see it was almost like Hollywood was kind of like rebooting itself during the 80s. And it was like a giant explosion of absolutely every type of film under the sun, and how it coalesced after that, I guess we could debate. But, for me, so many of my favorites in the 80s and such a unique look and feel to films from this time. Such a great decade for film.
Nathan, yourself?
I feel the same way, where there's an aesthetic to 80s movies that I love. And maybe this isn't really true, but it also kind of feels like this is sort of the start of what you could now sort of call genre films, because you had like these weird, like now, like we get like, lots of science fiction and stuff like that. And the 80s sort of started the idea of, they probably weren't thinking necessarily franchise right off the bat, but they want to try like big blockbusters, and every studio needed these big tentpole movies. And for me, I love watching movies from the 80s, even if they're kind of bad, because there's so many warm feelings about watching and just the look and feel. And also, I kind of like looking back in time. It's as silly, but the way people used to dress and what their hair looked like. There's something I love watching about that. I don't know why.
Yeah, I mean, with the dress code, it's definitely something to marvel at, like how we actually got away with a lot of these things. So it's pretty funny. But yeah, that's every era, every decade has its own style, of course. But with respect to movies, whether I agree partially with what you said, Nathan, this is the explosion of genre, but genre filmmaking existed before, especially in the 70s. I think that was kind of a mini explosion, or the big bang of genre filmmaking started in the 70s. I think the advent of filmmaking and the freedom for filmmaking techniques, and obviously we're talking about mainly the way practical effects were done, the way the cameras could move, or dollies. I mean, I don't know all the technical terms, but I think them being able to free themselves from heavier cameras really allowed themselves to start really experimenting with the way things are shot. And that's one of the things, and obviously then the introduction of CGI and special effects and all of these things in the 80s and the late 70s and the 80s really freed up a lot of filmmakers to expand their vision. And obviously the 80s, so many things are remade these days, and they're all 80s films. So obviously you look at the 80s, and I think the one thing is originality. Even though there's a lot of unoriginal material in the 80s, I just think that with respect to so many films, it was just so original. And I think that also had to do with the timing of so many great filmmakers and writers coming out of school. We were just blessed that these people, we grew up during this age. And that's why I call it the golden age. That's just for me. But how about action movies now of the 80s. How can you best describe action movies in there? Nathan, you go first. Like, what terminology comes to mind for you? And how about maybe any of the ones that you really are fond of or you really like?
The first thing, like when I think of action films of the 80s, the first thing that comes to mind is bad guys with Uzis. I don't know why. That's just the first thing that comes to mind, which is why I really love this movie that we're going to talk about. You know, one of my favorite action movies out of the 80s is probably like between Die Hard and Predator, I think, because those are two, like you were saying, Harry, like just very original ideas. And I mean, I guess Die Hard is actually based on a book, to my understanding. But I think action movies of this era they were really trying a lot of new things. And maybe towards the end of the 80s, and when you get into the 90s, they just kind of become the same over and over again. But I kind of think that there's something about 80s action films that you don't really have now. It's kind of hard to put my finger on it, but it's hard to get something like really original. Like not very many times now do you get a movie coming out and it's like, whoa, I'm so blown away by how unique it is. And, you know, I wish I could see Die Hard again for the first time.
Jeff, yourself.
I think Bad Guys with Uzis should be the new name of the podcast. That's what I think. Yeah, hard to say. I mean, I think Die Hard is the top action movie, if not of all time, for sure, of the 80s. As far as it has that aesthetic that we've talked about, very machismo. I mean, all of the men in these action movies, whether it's Stallone or, you know, Kurt Russell did a couple, obviously Arnold Schwarzenegger, you would go down the list. These very masculine men, you know, with big guns and not a whole lot of, I don't really know what the right term is. I don't want to say necessarily exploration of character because we do get some of that, but there's
no reflection.
Yeah, there's no reflection and there's no quarter given. Like they're men and that's it. Like there's no reflection. There's no other layers of their character other than the layers of their masculinity, which I think is an interesting comment on time. I guess it's like porn. It's hard to define, but you know it when you see it.
I partially agree with you guys. I'd say for the most part, there's no layers to or no depth to most, say 90% of these action movies, but you do get I found a lot of the action movies were Cold War tension focused. A lot of, in some cases, political propaganda found its way into many of the action films at the time. You mentioned the masculinity. I mean, this really was the explosion of all that especially with Stallone and Arnie and to a smaller extent, Bruce Willis and Chuck Norris and those other B-level guys. You had these kind of heroes that were really beefed up bodybuilders and that expectation and aesthetic has found its way onwards and has now crept its way into how we want action stars of today to look and as well as superheroes. Except they didn't need rubber suits to accentuate their physique. But we also have, like, as you guys mentioned, Die Hard.
Thanks, Adam West. Thanks. That's deep cut.
Deep cut. In the 80s also, you still have, as we talked about the originality, but it's the best of all those stereotypical benchmarks. You guys mentioned Die Hard, Predator, Rambo is up there for me, and that's a character that I think that has, especially in the original one, it has a lot of depth there. It can range from down-to-earth characters to over-the-top ridiculous movies. So there's a large range of movies that fall into the genre. And then you also have buddy cop movies, which is what we're going to be doing today. And Lethal Weapon in that franchise is being what most people think of when it comes to buddy cop movies. And with respect to those 80s action movies, though, you may have partially answered this, but what are the strengths and weaknesses of these type of movies? I mean, you guys already partially said, you know, there's not a lot of character depth, but what are the strengths of these movies then? You guys just go ahead. Free for all.
Yeah. I think one of the strengths, I mean, we talked about there's not a whole lot of exploration of the character or reflection, but I think one of the strengths is the focus of storytelling. We don't have needless twists and turns. We don't have needless, superfluous storylines on the side with, you know, sometimes we get it with the kids, or the girlfriend, or the wife, or whatever. It's usually just simple stories and great action. I mean, if you take a look at Predator, for example, that movie's not about a goddamn thing. That movie's about an alien who kills a bunch of dudes in the jungle and Arnie blows him up with a nuke. That's what that movie's about. And it's fucking brilliant. It's just fantastic. Die Hard, I know he's trying to save his wife, but that just has some context to why he's in that situation. It's about Bruce Willis killing a skyscraper filled with terrorists, and that's it. I love the clarity of the storytelling. None of those stories mean a goddamn thing. Not really. It usually hangs on the charisma of the lead actor. In the case of buddy cop films, the chemistry between our leads. And that's kind of it. They play it straight so that the storylines themselves, don't go into, the storylines definitely go into goofy territory, but they play it straight. The leads sell it. And I think that's a huge strength nowadays. Like, that concept is gone because we always have to have some kind of twist or conspiracy, some bullshit about the guy's daughter, family, ex-wife, custody, some bullshit. And it's totally unnecessary, but that's always thrown into the movies now. So I lament the loss of just the simplicity of these films.
Yeah, I have to echo the exact same thing, because one of the things that bugs me now is that we have these movies, these action movies that may come out, and they could just simplify it, but no, they have the bad guy fighting to get insulin for his dog or something like that now, and there's always going to be that twist at the end.
I want to see that movie.
And all these convoluted storylines that weave in and out of the regular movie, and it kind of almost feels like some sort of script writing exercise for someone to see like just how many threads and they weave in and out, and it almost becomes a little bit too clever. And I find now too, there's not that many we don't really have the idea of the action star anymore, not the big action star, not the way the 80s used to have that. And in the 80s, it was the charisma of those stars that really carried the movie. And the other thing with a lot of these movies, not all of them, but the biggest sin that a movie can commit is to be boring. For me, I can forgive quite a bit in a movie as long as I'm having fun and it's moving along. Sure, nothing really matters, right? You look at the Lethal Weapon movies, nothing matters, but you have a good time just moving forward with these very simple stories.
In some movies, whether you're talking about Die Hard or Lethal Weapon as examples there too, and I mentioned Rambo, there are some movies that, the better of the bunch at least, that do try and bring layers to the character in some small aspect. Now, of course, they do that, but then it's so complicated in the action movies as you described today that it just loses focus. That's just my take. So let's just pull the curtain back a little bit and let's just focus on Stallone and Kurt Russell. Geoff, I believe that you are a fan of Kurt Russell to some extent, and Sly is your favorite punching bag. What are your thoughts on these actors? Do you have any favorite movies for these actors? And then Nathan, you can respond too. So Geoff, go first.
Yeah, I love me some Kurt Russell. Yeah, he's one of my favorites from this era. Still works today and has had some really good roles. Hands down, my favorite film with Kurt Russell is Big Trouble in Little China, and he's absolutely hysterical in that film. And then everything else is a distant after that. But he's an interesting guy because he can be very funny. His good timing. He's not a great actor. He doesn't have huge range, but he's very charismatic. And, he's not beefy, big, huge guy. He's a little bit more regular physique, but, he kind of gets himself into shape for some of the action roles that he's done. Escape from New York, Escape from LA are a couple of goofy movies of his as well that I quite enjoy. As far as Stallone, I definitely give him the gears a little bit, but I got a lot of respect for the guy too. He's done, not just a long career, but varied as a screenwriter and as an actor and as a bodybuilder. He's kind of got his distinctive voice, which limits the types of roles I think that he's, going to be able to give himself. But, you watch Rocky and First Blood. Those are both very good performances from the guy. So he certainly has the ability to act. It's a shame. I think he's capable of more than, he's allowed himself to do. I'm not as emotionally connected to his films. I know you're more a fan of his. Arnie was my guy between the two, but certainly respect him for what he's done.
Nathan.
I'm on the same page as Geoff. I think Kurt Russell, I was going to say he's great, a decent actor, but he's not necessarily a range actor. But he can kind of, get into a role and, it feels natural, but he doesn't ever do it. I think he's usually the same now when you see him and stuff versus, well, maybe not exactly the same, but certainly through the 80s and 90s, he played a lot of similar types of characters. And Big Trouble in Little China is one of my favorite movies of all time. And just like Geoff, I was more of an Arnie guy growing up. And for me, it's weird because like Rocky and Rambo felt like those are like movies that adults watch, and that wasn't something I would really watch. So I wasn't really into him. I think like the first time I thought, oh, like I really like this movie that he's in was Demolition Man, which was only a few years after Tango and Cash. And that was, I thought that was kind of, for me, that's a fun movie. And I thought he was good in it. And, he's one of those guys who's like one of those secret smart people because of his voice. Like, you think he's kind of a dummy, but he writes many scripts. And I mean, through the 80s and 90s, I think he's got his name on, I'm sure he's co-written many of the movies that he's been in and, throughout the years. I certainly would also have used him as a punching bag here and there. I've kind of lightened up over the years just because, I think what he's been trying to do with the Expendables movies and, try and have like a bit of a sense of humor about himself. I think that's good for an actor who's in his sort of position, who can kind of look back on his life and say, okay, yeah, I sort of get a bit of the cheese factor.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I'm a bit biased because, like, Sly was one of my childhood heroes, and he kind of still is. He's not the greatest actor, but Geoff, as you mentioned, I think he gets a bad rap. He has more range than I think most people give him credit for. And, through stereotypes and maybe because of his voice or his looks, like he's not getting certain types of roles. And a lot of people think just because Rambo and Rocky were uneducated in a sense, they think he's also dumb. I think he's also done a lot of bad projects. There's some funny moments in interviews where he says that his agent, him and Arnie were in such competition with each other in the 80s that Arnie let loose some projects like, oh, I'm going to appear in Stopper, My Mom Will Shoot. Let's just leak that out in the press. And then Sly's agent says, no, Arnie was going to do this. I'm telling you, he's about to do this. So Sly signs up for it, even though he has reservations. And then there you get Stopper, My Mom Will Shoot and some other shitty projects. He kind of reminds me of The Cage. I think there's some brilliance in Sly, but unfortunately, he, half of his work I think is very good and the other half is not so good. But of course, First Blood and Rocky, I think, especially when it comes to the Rambo films, Die Hard is probably my second or third favorite action film. It's not the best. I think First Blood, if we can classify it as an action film, is the creme de la creme that came out of the 80s. It's brilliant work. I agree with what you said, Nathan. It's a little bit more for adults. It's almost a slightly different genre, but then if I just want to go into complete action movie cheeseball fest, if I look at scope and epicness, I go Rambo 3. That has the best action I've seen in any movie. But of course, Die Hard is right up there too. Kurt Russell, I love Kurt Russell just like you guys. He's so charismatic that his mullet also oozes charisma.
I think his hair was like third build on this movie.
It could have been, and if it wasn't, it should have been. Of course, Big Trouble Little China. I'm not as much of a fan as you guys are in that, but I do like it. I also remember, Tombstone, Backdraft, Death Proof. He was great in that, even though the final product wasn't the best, but he was good.
Tombstone was great.
Tombstone was good, but I haven't seen a lot of his other work. I think Kurt Russell was really into a lot of romantic comedies in the 80s and 90s, and I really didn't watch a lot of that during that time. So there's a lot of Kurt Russell work out there that I should probably go back and watch just for him. The funny thing is I think both these guys are going to appear in the second Guardians of the Galaxy movie. I'm not sure if they're going to be together or not. I just remember seeing an interview with Chris Pratt, and he says the most exciting thing he was experiencing during the second movie filming was that Tango and Cash are being reunited. I guess Pratt is a fan. So let's just quickly... I actually
said that to Geoff just before we move on from that. I remember I'd read something similar as well, and I said to Geoff the other day, I said, the director of Guardians of the Galaxy has kind of a sense of humor, so I'll be a little bit let down if there isn't at least a slight nod to Tango and Cash.
That might be pushing it, but I hope that's the case.
It's tough. It's tough.
Yeah.
But...
Especially since I know the role Kurt Russell's playing, I don't want to spoil it, so I'm not sure that's going to be possible.
No, you can high five a planet.
Oh, okay, so you know about the planet. Okay.
Oh yeah, that's not really a spoiler. I mean that is his name.
Okay.
He is literally the living planet, so it's not a spoiler.
Planet. Okay, let's just, before we get into the plot synopsis, guys, just quickly, very briefly, like 30 seconds, 1 minute, each of you. Tango and Cash, what are your memories? I know each of you have watched it based on what you've seen. Geoff, quickly, any memories?
Yeah, not really. I don't think I saw it when it came out. I would have discovered this much later, and I see it here and there over the years. And the only thing that stands out to me for Tango Cash is every time I watch it, I've always forgotten what had happened. So every time I watch it, it's almost like watching it for the first time.
That's interesting. Nathan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't remember exactly when I saw it either. I know I definitely did not see it in theaters. It's probable that I saw it on television, maybe sometime in the early to late 90s, but until recently, I don't think I'd seen this movie in 20 years. And just like Geoff, I didn't remember anything, and I was so blown away by everything that happened.
Yeah, for me, I remember clearly because I was, a big Sly fan. So I remember reading in the newspaper, I was following this movie. It's a new Sly release, so I remember reading the review in the local paper, and reviewer calling this one a massive disappointment and did get heavily panned at the time. And I'll layer some trivia a little later, but I ended up watching this on home video rentals, and I've been watching it ever since, here and there on TV, and then now I own the film. Let's get into the plot synopsis here. So, Tango and Cash. Cash and Tango, two very different cops in different police departments in LA. Ray Tango's passion is more in the financial world, as he thinks Rambo is a pussy. Gabriel Cash is your everyday Joe Sixpack who enjoys pizza, beer, how bad things get, he always has time for the ladies. Both Tango and Cash are good at seemingly stopping drug shipments to only one single boss named Perret. You see, Perret is a special kind of guy, one who seems powerful enough to manipulate the justice system and stay in the shadows, yet his drug shipments keep getting botched by Tango and Cash. Oh, and he also might have special powers from his special relationship with mice. Who knows? But despite warnings from other subordinate bosses under him, he sets on a plan to take down the two best cops in LA by, of course, framing them for murder. Tango and Cash unfortunately get terrible advice from their attorneys and admit their unwarranted guilt to receive minimum security sentences. But Perret's special powers has them transferred to a maximum security prison and has somehow pulled the wool over the police's eyes as they are unable to track them down. So Tango and Cash realize they are in trouble, and after a night of puns, punching, getting mocked by Conan the Barbarian, and electrocution, in other words, FUBAR, they decide to escape prison. After prison, they gather enough evidence to prove their innocence, find out who Perret is, and they infiltrate his headquarters. After some 80s classic last stand fisticuffs with second-to-last final stage bosses, they find themselves in Perret's Hall of Mirrors, who now has Tango's sister hostage and has wired the place to blow in only a couple of minutes. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the dumbest villain of them all? Tango and Cash easily kill Perret and escape outside before the headquarters explode to enjoy some newly added nighttime pollution, appropriately named Perret. Tango and Cash realize that even though they are two very different people, they really work well together and are now BFFs. Maybe this is what the story of Superman versus Batman should have been. The end.
Getting a dig on BVS.
Any chance I get.
Well, I was going to say I was disappointed you didn't start the synopsis with "Let's do it."
I wanted to, but I had to restrain myself.
It certainly sounds ridiculous when you lay it out like that, Harry, and I think that when you see it, it's even more ridiculous overall. So good job in the synopsis that you did sort of capture the pace and zaniness of plot.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think actually that synopsis makes it sound like pre-average 80s action movie that doesn't even begin to capture the craziness of this movie.
Okay, so before we get into the movie, let me hit you with some trivia. And there's actually quite a bit here, so we've already talked about Stallone and Russell, the main villain of the movie, who's Perret. His name's Perret. He's played by Jack Palance, whom I'm sure you're somewhat familiar with. Most geeks would probably remember him as the Joker's first victim in Batman, as he played Carl Grissom, which also debuted this year in 1989, but it was in many, many movies, and he was actually nominated for 3 Oscars for supporting actor in his career. And I can't vouch for the performance quality, but he won for City Slickers, which I've never seen. The only thing I remember in the Oscars is that during his acceptance speech, he did one-arm push-ups when he accepted it.
Yeah, I remember that. Totally remember that.
That was his thing back in the day, because he was like 110. And he was doing push-ups all the time. He would go on talk shows and do it too.
And he didn't do like 2 or 3. Like he cranked them out. He must have done like 10 or 20. I mean, it was insane.
Yeah, he must have done like at least 10 or something like that. But as I mentioned, he made a lot of movies, but he didn't do much after City Slickers, which wasn't that far long after Tango and Cash. And I think there was a sequel to that movie, and he passed away in 2006. So do you guys recall seeing him in anything other than Batman and this movie?
There's a movie I saw with.
There's many times.
Oh yeah, I saw that. There's one with Chevy Chase, and like I forget exactly. It's a stupid comedy of, I think Jack Palance plays like a FBI agent or something like that, and has to move in with Chevy Chase's family because he's like watching a house across the street or something like that. It's ridiculous. But yeah, I don't know his career that well.
Geoff?
I must have seen him in something. I mean, I don't know if iconic is the right. What's that?
He's distinctive.
He's very distinctive, yeah. But no, I can't think of anything else that he stands out for me from City Slickers. That's where obviously Batman, but I know him from City Slickers. It's probably the biggest thing that I know him from. I think his career, his heyday would have been, 50s and 60s. So, wouldn't be that familiar with that time. But he sure has a very distinct voice and manner about him.
Yeah, he does. But yeah, I haven't, aside from Batman in this movie, I've never seen anything. So this movie had many, many, many production problems. The original director of this film, he's a Russian director, Andrei Konchalovsky, was apparently fired by producer John Peters because Peters wanted the movie to be even more goofy and humorous, while Stallone and Konchalovsky wanted a bit more of a balanced tone. Because this movie started filming without a finished script, as soon as the movie started getting behind schedule, Peters fired Konchalovsky, which was 3 months into filming at the time, and then executive producer Peter McDonald stepped in, and he had actually directed Rambo 3, so he was a temporary replacement as a director until another director named Albert Magnoli came in. Stallone also had issues with the original director of photography, Barry Sonnenfeld, and he had him fired. Warner's also did not want to budge on the release date, which was December 15th, 1989, which is why I was saying it's literally the last action movie released in the 80s. There were reshoots in late fall, early winter of the year, and the movie was scrambling to make its release date. Warner's execs also wanted to trim down some of the violence at the last minute to avoid some MPAA issues. So in the last act, we don't see a lot of blood out of the victims, and there's a lot of quick edits. And when the bad guys get shot because they wanted to avoid some additional gore. One of the writers on the film was Jeffrey Boehm, and he had worked on the scripts for all the Lethal Weapon films, but he was quoted as absolutely hating this movie. And he called the script awful. He did his job. I guess he was a pro, but he didn't even want to be credited for this film at all. So you'll never see his name on the credits. Composer of this film is Harold Faltermeyer, and Faltermeyer's name may not be as famous as you guys like John Williams or Jerry Goldsmith, but just out of curiosity, do you guys recognize the composer's name or any of his scores?
No, but I kind of felt like the movie sounded like Beverly Hills Cop.
Very good. He was very prominent in the 80s, and most people would recognize his work on the Beverly Hills Cop movies.
Aha, nailed it.
Yeah, he created the Axel Foley theme that's pretty famous. His style is more synth with respect to music, and which is pretty obvious from this movie as well. He provided music for Top Gun, The Running Man, Fletch. He did other work in the 80s as well, but shortly after Tango and Cash, he semi-retired to focus on family life. But apparently, this protege, or, I don't know how closely they were related, but apparently Hans Zimmer was heavily influenced by Faltermeyer and his scores, and that's why when you hear some of Zimmer's scores, you hear a bit of synth aspects to his music as well.
Oh, wow.
Even though it's a bit more modernized. So this movie's budget went over by about $20 million, mainly because of delays and all those production problems they had. According to Box Office Mojo, it made $63 million domestically, which was pretty good, but I can't find any information on its international take. But apparently this movie was very successful on home video sales. And the actor who's playing Ponytail henchman, Rakeen, his name is Brian James. He had mentioned in interviews that this movie was so successful overseas that for several years he would get swarmed by media and fans all the time because of this movie. He's the one getting swarmed.
I'm a little skeptical of that story.
Yeah, maybe, but you never know. And finally, one last bit of trivia. The actor originally scheduled to play Cash was not Kurt Russell, but was in fact Patrick Swayze. But he dropped out to go star in Roadhouse, and Kurt Russell was then cast. So with respect to a sequel, considering all the production problems this movie had, it's probably no surprise there wasn't one, and Warner's also owned this one and also owns Lethal Weapon, and Lethal Weapon 2 was actually released earlier in 1989 and made so much more money that they probably just said, let's just focus on more Lethal Weapon sequels and drop this one. So guys, any thoughts on the trivia before we start getting into the movie?
So in total, what was the budget then with the $20 million over?
I think one source I saw, I couldn't find it again. This was like early on research. I think it was $55 million, and it made $63 million domestically. But internet, like Stallone was very, very famous in the 80s and 90s for international box office stake, both Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I would assume it would have made at least that amount again overseas, if not more. So it probably made its money back, maybe a bit of a profit. And then if it was so successful on home video, so probably was a profitable venture for Warner Brothers. But again, because they had Lethal Weapon rights as well during this time, they probably said, let's just ditch this, and there's so many problems, and then, let's just focus on Lethal Weapon.
I am still surprised that they wouldn't have at least tried for a sequel, because I don't ever remember hearing the idea floated.
I think there was another thing, and this is not something I could find recently, but a long, long time ago, I kind of remember reading an article with Kurt Russell, and he says he will never appear in a sequel because he feels it'll never top the original, and I think maybe that could have been one of the other roadblocks there as well.
Oh, I see.
So, that story. But whether that's true or not, I have no idea. So, let's get into the movie, Tango and Cash. So we have the opening here. We have Tango chasing the tanker full of drugs. Let's talk about the scene as a whole. Tango stopping the tanker, the aftermath here. You even get the introduction to Perret and his cronies. Let's talk about everything up to, but just prior to when we first get introduced to Cash.
Yeah, what's interesting, as I said before, where I kind of forget about this movie every time I see it. I always remember him shooting the tanker and the cocaine starts pouring out. Aside from his dinky little gun is, I always sort of see the film and I think they try to go for it as well, where I see Stallone as the by-the-book cop. He's wearing the three-piece suit. I'm assuming that, they chose the gun specifically so that it didn't look like a giant, Clint Eastwood hand cannon, more refined, a gentleman. But he's not a by-the-book cop. Like, he's out there on his own. They're telling him to turn back. I would suggest this is a dangerous maneuver for a police officer to try to pull over a tanker in this manner. And, when he's, shooting it in order to unveil the evidence, like, everything here is not done he is not a straight-laced by-the-book cop. He is still a rogue cop. He's just wearing a three-piece suit. And so it's always kind of jarring to me to watch it and be like, okay, yeah, no, he's not really all about the paperwork and procedure. He still goes off and does stuff on his own. So that's sort of what really stands out for me at the start here.
How about the introduction to Perret and his cronies as they drive by right after the shipment is captured?
Yeah, it's pretty goofy. You mentioned in the synopsis of it's sort of like the second to last level boss, and they kind of start telegraphing that right away. It's a very cartoonish type of villain. Jack Palance is chewing scenery through the whole thing here. It's appropriate. I think it works. It's kind of an 80s movie villain. I think it's appropriate, and it puts a smile on my face to see it, but there's not a whole lot going on other than the other thing I had written down is that, Tango kind of has Clark Kent vibe going on with the glasses and the three-piece suit.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that, like, even to this day, we just throw glasses on someone and it's just this shorthand for, oh, they're real smart. And like Geoff, like, I thought it was weird, that he's wearing this suit and he's not a by the books cop because, like buddy cop movie. Well, I guess we haven't really had the introduction to Kurt Russell yet, but I wanted to know what were the bullets that he was using? Because there was not that I need a real explanation, but he's got a snub nose revolver. It replaces the bullets. And I thought, oh, okay, this is going to be interesting. And he's going to be, they're setting up that he's a really great shot. But now he's got these special bullets that are going to somehow take out this tanker, but there's no explanation as well. Is that, like, was the glass bulletproof or something like that? It was odd to me that there's no explanation for that. I wonder if it was just edited out. And then, of course, Stallone at the height of his power is confident enough to call Rambo a pussy, which I had a pretty good laugh at. And the other two mid-level bosses there, James Hong and
Mark Alamo.
Something.
Mark Alamo,
yeah, Galdicott. Yeah, I love those two actors, especially James Hong. I mean, I see him pop up like when you need sort of like not generic, but kind of like, Asian bad guy. He was always kind of a go-to guy in the 80s there and into the 90s. Yeah, it's a little cheesy, but it's actually, I did kind of appreciate that. It's like, okay, like, we're barely 5 minutes into the movie. We're getting all the players, and I kind of like that pacing. I don't know how you guys felt that, but I was like, oh, okay, yeah, here's the bad guy. And he's like, oh, I'm laying out a plan. Don't you guys worry, right? And I did appreciate that. Okay, we're just moving the story along.
Well, actually, the thing that I enjoy the most and I laugh out loud the most here is I love how Perret and his cronies drive by because he had no faith his shipment would actually make it.
Yeah.
Because you'll see later, like, all the shipments get captured by the police, so he had to drive by to check on it. But I agree with you, both of you guys, in a sense. You get a good timestamp of what 80s lifestyle was here. I mean, you get Stallone's three-piece suit, the bigger, which is kind of that open, long fashion coat, the high pants, the double-breasted. You get the big round eyeglasses. Even the police chief, he comes out with these cheap yellow sunglasses that you buy at like Walmart, which I think was a style at the time. But what I enjoyed here was the dialogue was already really light and fluffy. And the puns start right away. Rambo's a pussy. Oh, would you look at that? It's snowing. And these are all winks to the audience here. And I really enjoyed it. But actually, one of the first things I actually really noticed that I really wrote down was the soundtrack. So we talked about Harold Faltermeyer. It's a very synth score here, very 80s. And I think the score should be talked about as we go through this movie because it's very, very noticeable. Just like, I guess, Lethal Weapons soundtrack was very, very noticeable, and Die Hard's was noticeable, and Predators and Rambo's. And that's something I think that we can talk about is 80s action movies, is that the score was very prominent and distinctive in all of these action movies, at least the ones that were the best of the best. And I don't know what you guys think about that with respect to scores in the 80s, even within action movies, or even...
I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely agree. And I it is something I maybe forget about here and there, but I love hearing, I mean, I like synth music in general and electronic music. I don't know like how you feel about modern action movies, but yeah, we don't really kind of get anything that's terribly memorable, even though like this is like, it's still kind of a riff off of, and I actually, when I just watched it, I was like, man, that sounds like, I thought it was going to go into the Beverly Hills Cop theme. I forget the name of that theme song, but it was so similar. And even though it's a bit of a riff on it, I really did enjoy it.
Yeah, to James Hong, as you brought up, Nathan. He's playing a guy named Quan. Just about James Hong, as we mentioned, like he's been in so many movies. He's been over 500 roles, both on TV and movies. He's still he's still acting today. He was or still
is. He still alive?
He's still alive. He's still acting.
He's got to be like 90 years old.
You're very close. You're very close.
Like he was acting. I remember like hearing a thing where he was like an actor during World War II or something like that, and he would go overseas and do like blackface for the troops, and like it's so weird. That is impressive.
Yeah, and he was actually was and maybe still is. Can't recall, president of the Asian Actors Guild in Hollywood. Deservedly so. Like, he's been around forever. But his more famous roles were Big Trouble in Little China, Blade Runner, Chinatown. He's done a lot of recent voiceover work because he is older. He is 87 years old, to answer your question, Nathan. But for me, I'll always remember him as Seinfeld for... So that's my favorite role of his. So
Cartwright.
And then we have Mark Alamo as Gul Dukat, and let's move on. Yeah, he's done a lot of roles too, but Gul Dukat being his most prominent claim to fame there. But just wanted to touch quickly on the character of Tango for Sly. This is a very different role for him, and I know that we're talking about he's still a rogue cop who doesn't play by the rules, and that's true. He's still a tough guy, but for Sly in the 80s, this was a stretch. And I think we could talk about this as the movie goes on. He is a very different character than the previous roles he's played. Like, he's not as machismo. He's a little bit more of an intellect, even though it's broad strokes, light and humorous, caring. And I liked what I saw here right away. And now let's move on to Gabriel Cash, so Kurt Russell's character. Let's talk about his scene. And with Asian assassin and that truck chase in the parking lot, let's talk about this next. Nathan, how about you start first?
I think you mean Asian Guile, that hair.
Yeah, it is Asian Guile.
Yeah, so the introduction, I thought like it was interesting, like this whole sequence where he's chasing this assassin. I kind of, it's maybe a little slow by modern comparison, but I kind of like moving along this story. We introduce him in, this bachelor pad, and he's got his bachelor cars and the boot gun, which is amazing, but so out of place. It's so weird. And then the ensuing chase is really cool. But I mean, I think they're trying to establish, it's weird because we've sort of seen Stallone as a bit of a rogue. And then you have this guy who's dressed more roguish and is supposed to be more like the gritty guy, I guess, is they're just, like you said, Harry, like there's a lot of broad strokes going on here to try and introduce these characters. And man, that hair, the hair is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, the hair is amazing. How about the action scene, though, with the truck chase? Any further comments there in that parking lot where he captures the guy?
I kind of liked it. I mean, it was actually, I thought it was a fairly well-paced, short action sequence that they didn't really draw out. But also, who was fucking in a car in the middle of the day?
That's 80s. I wrote that down too. It's like you got to have a boob shot somewhere. People were having sex everywhere. It doesn't.
Yeah, they had to get to it right there. They couldn't, because it's like in an apartment building. Like, don't go up to your apartment. It's like, man, we got to do this right now in the car. Unbelievable. I also liked the guy's truck, because that also feels like a real 80s thing, like those big trucks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was kind of like the truck that Marty McFly retconned into his life in Back to the Future.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
That's true.
The big lights on it and stuff, yeah. Again, like I said, we've been introduced to the road cop in the three-piece suit, and now we are introduced to the road cop in a $9 shirt. And it's a grittier introduction to the character because we have sort of the closed spaces of the parking garage. I like the stunt, though, where the guy just jumps out of the window, lands in the car, and off he goes. And then Cash, jumps out after him and totally biffs the landing. And good opening for him as well. Yeah, the couple in the backseat of the car there was so 80s. Like, Harry, like you said, you got to have a boob shot if you're doing an 80s action movie.
In the most ridiculous way. Yeah.
They got completely gratuitous and ridiculous. Yeah. For sure. But yeah, I think it's a solid intro to both characters, and I guess we'll talk about it as it goes along, watching it with the analyzer's mind on it, like what exactly is the difference between these two characters at this point, other than how they dress. But I guess we'll get into that as we go.
I like the scene as well. First thing, again, I'm going to point out the soundtrack, and I'm not sure if you guys can recall, but the music here, Cash actually has his own theme, and it's a little bit more of a buffoonish type of theme, and I was like laughing out loud, like to myself. It fits Cash very well. If you guys ever go back and watch this movie again, just pay attention to his particular theme in the scene, and it appears up later in the film as well when he's alone. I love how he, chuckles how he gets second billing in the paper while Tango gets the headline. And I love how the news just makes it how these two guys are the only ones involved in any of these drug busts. Yeah. Like, wouldn't there be a task force? Like, is it the media's fault that Tango and Cash get singled out by Perret?
The newspaper game has changed. I mean, that's just the way it was, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, this is more exposition.
Super cops.
Yeah, super cops, right? This is more of a, trope of the 80s, of course, and this genre, but, I thought it was kind of funny, a little bit of a parody with respect to sensationalism of the media. Question I asked myself here is, like, the Asian guy assassin, how does he know Cash is wearing a vest so that, you're not supposed to ask yourself these questions, but whatever.
Oh my God, I never thought of that. Like, and when you think about it, that's a really good point.
Yeah, like, how did he shoots him? Yep. Even though I think there's a later scene where Cash says, like, these bullets suck, he still would have gotten shot in the chest regardless. That didn't make any sense to me whatsoever. But yeah, the parking lot chase leaves a little bit to be desired. The only thing I like is the boob shot. It's not because it's boobs, it's just because it's a staple of these, and I just laugh out loud every time I see it. But again, there's another theme in terms of the soundtrack that's present here already. We're 7 minutes into the movie, and we already have 4 themes established in the movie from the soundtrack. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And one last point, I thought this garage and parking lot looked like that same parking lot they filmed the Seinfeld parking lot episode. So that's just something I thought as well. After this, he arrests the guy, and we cut back to the Beverly Hills Police Department where Tango is working, and we get to meet Catherine. Eventually, we come to know that's his sister, but at this point, it's ambiguous. Could be a girlfriend. What did you guys think about that? Do the later scenes pay off better? Is there a payoff because they kept it ambiguous here? Or was it telegraphed? Was it too obvious? What are your thoughts? And what do you think of their relationship and Terry Hatcher in this movie? At least in this
It's kind of weird. I mean, it's a little on the nose that they're trying to make it appear to be like a girlfriend, that whole conversation. I mean, even though kind of going in, like, again, I had forgotten Terry Hatcher was even in this movie. But when I saw the scene, I did remember that, oh, yeah, that's the sister. And so I guess maybe just on a rewatch, it seems a little too obvious. I thought the payoff later on was fine. When we get to that scene, I got a lot to say about that scene. But again, like, they're also trying to like sort of establish that, she's, they say like dancing. But I mean, again, I think they're implying, she's a stripper.
Geoff, yourself.
Well, that's interesting. It always seemed very platonic, even from the start. And because that's one of the things I did remember is that she's his sister. I didn't even watch the scene. I mean, you're right. They didn't reveal that there, but I just made that assumption. So maybe they played it well, like so well that I didn't think that there was anything more between them. I don't know if that helps the payoff later on or not, because I just assumed that there was nothing between the two. Maybe it's because they seemed like they're clearly not together, and there's no spark between the two. Like I said, it's very platonic. So I never had any thought past that about their relationship.
That's weird. Because I kind of feel the way the dialogue plays out. I mean, I know like there's more like with you, what you're saying is true with maybe some of the more of the chemistry, but I thought that what they were trying to do with, there's so many kind of like little lines of like, stay here, we'll work it out. Don't be, and he kind of laid it a little bit when she said, how about I call you? And that was like a sign of like, oh, this is a bit of a breakup almost. I mean, it's obviously not, but I don't know. I was a little bit all over the place, like with the scene. I mean, it's a little harder for me to judge it objectively when I kind of know what the relationship is. And so maybe that's why I kind of felt like, oh, it's maybe a little bit too...
He just seems too fatherly in it, though. That's how it...
Well, that's just the age difference, right? Man. I mean, there's like a 20-year age gap between the two of them.
Well, that's definitely part of it, for sure. Like, that's why, like, there was nothing... I see what you mean, that they were trying to write dialogue so that you could read it, because you're always going to jump, whether it's the, ex-girlfriend or the ex-wife, like you're always going to read it that way.
Yeah.
Just how the chemistry was and how they read the lines. Like it never occurred to me that they are or were ever a couple in the past.
Okay.
Well, that's a good thing in the end result, but I got the interpretation in the scene that they were in a relationship, like a romantic relationship. At least that's how the dialogue is presenting itself, but it's kind of looks like the end of that relationship because they're kind of more distant.
Yes, that's what I picked up.
That's what I picked up as well. Drop a tiny bit of trivia here. So Terry Hatcher, this is, I think, her first or second film role. She had done a little bit of TV prior to this, but this was her second film role in Hollywood. And after this, she kind of took off. She got a variety of different roles and got into more TV and eventually became a Bond girl. I think that's your favorite Bond girl there, Geoff.
Oh, man. I felt
in your
really
favorite
bad for her,
movie,
actually, in that movie.
No, so did I.
I really like Terry Hatcher. It's just such a waste.
Yeah. It's the movie's fault, not her. Let's talk about Cash and his. We see him in his South Central LA location. Must be there. So run down. I love, the polar opposites of where these guys work. It's the differences. So I like how the movie is just going complete 180s. Nothing similar. Even though they're, as you pointed out, they're road cops. But I just love the differences that they're being shown here. What do you think of his introduction into his police station and his interrogation of the Asian assassin?
This is where I got to start getting into some stuff here. So, because we're getting this right after Tango and Terry Hatcher have their little exchange.
Correct.
And Tango is such a square. He gets a fucking margin call. And then we cut to Cash, and he's like, oh, my favorite shirt. It cost me $9. Like, okay. So they're both rogue cops. And the only difference is that one guy's rich and he's doing this for fucking fun, and the other guy is poor. And other than that, they're the same cop. I thought that was very 80s. That's the difference, is like economic data, and that's it. And also, no, go ahead, Eric.
No, that's true. I would just say it's very 80s, like 80s Wall Street. The classes, but that really is prevalent today anyways.
It's interesting that, we have our hero, a rich guy, and our hero is also a poor guy. Usually nowadays, it's one or the other. Having both is in the same film is interesting. But the 80s were great, to think back to the time when you could, torture suspects and violate their rights, and he's the good guy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, those are the good guys, are the guys who break the rules, torture suspects, get things done at all costs. Like the rules are for squares, man. Like, we're the good guys so we can break the rules. And that's a very American sentiment. I think that's born out of the 80s.
This is Reagan presidency propaganda.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to remember,
we're going to get things done.
You have to remember, like the 80s, Cold War is still going on here.
Yeah.
It's nearing the end of the Cold War, but really in Hollywood, the Cold War is still prevalent.
Yeah, absolutely. And it
still will be for a little while. Because I remember movies in the early 90s where Russians would be still the bad guys, or sometimes Cubans or something like that.
It's funny to look at it today. Especially over the past year, and you take a look at all of the stories that happened over the last year or so about excessive force, racism in the police force, all of those stories. We've all seen it. We've all heard it. That's what it looks like in real life. when the police are like that, right? Violating rights, using excessive force. You go back to 1989 and it's just fun. Like that's what the good guys did. It's just really bizarre to see that type of behavior and look at it through a modern lens like that.
And they almost make a joke of it because then that other cop walks in and
English 101.
And he makes a little quip and the guy's like,
which was awesome.
All right. Yeah.
Oh, there goes Cash again.
Also, Geoff, isn't 24 one of your favorite TV shows?
Oh man, 24 is a love letter. It's a love letter to torture. Yeah, it is not one of my favorites, but I have watched every single episode.
Geoff is right. I mean, I thought that, well, first of all, leading up to this, again, I sort of appreciate that, we're just moving the story along and we're trying to get, they're doing all these broad strokes to quickly get us up to speed with what these characters are about. And yeah, thinking back on my memories of the movie, I always thought that, Stallone played straight-laced guy and Kurt Russell was, more of the loose cannon. And that is not the case. They are exactly the same other than the way they dress, which, by the way, halfway through the movie, they dump all that. But it was a little bit jarring to sort of see what is actually kind of like police brutality treated as kind of like nothing, as a bit of a joke. Also, what fucking interrogation room has urinals in it? Or, well, I guess it's the locker room, but it has a table there. I think that was the
bathroom. He was going to the bathroom.
By
himself, so that doesn't make any sense.
Well, no, there was a cop in there when he walked in, and then he kind of okay, why don't you just hit the bricks? And then, but there's a table there and lockers. I don't know. There's something really gross about the whole setup to me.
His police headquarters. They're the poor district, so
I guess
they couldn't afford anything. So I can let that slide.
Is that and then if you just turn the camera the other way, it's also the gun range at the same time.
Good point. Actually, I wanted to point out, I did love this scene. I loved this scene when I was a kid. The English 101 cracked me up every time. It still kind of does, but I agree with you guys. The police brutality of the 80s and the good guys, it was okay for them to do it. Now it's more frowned upon, or rules to play, but that is definitely a staple of the genre back then. But what I found funny, I'm going to go back to the soundtrack again. If you guys ever listen to this again, the minute Cash enters the room to interrogate him and ushers the police guard out, his theme plays, but it now has racist Asian theme to it. Oh, God. I'm not joking. I rewound it, and
I can't believe I missed that.
Yeah, they put an Asian theme to it, even though it's still
I'm almost surprised that Kurt Russell didn't give him a ching chong chang to his face all at the same time.
I was laughing my ass off. I said, oh man, these are details that I never even really noticed because I really wasn't paying attention. I just was enjoying the ride. But now I'm making notes and I'm saying, oh man, I gotta write this down.
I think I'm gonna go buy this movie. I only rented it. I think I might buy it just cause I'm really glad that you were able to pick up this, Harry, with the soundtrack, because I think this is really fascinating, actually.
Yeah, no, it is fascinating. I think it's a very interesting topic to discuss through the movie. But I did enjoy these scenes for the most part, despite its racial undertones here. Now, the next scene is we cut back to Perret and his cronies and henchmen at his evil lair in headquarters. We see Ponytail for the first time. So, Geoff, that must be a blast in the past for you. The actor here,
My hair was always nice, man. I washed my hair. I didn't have that greasy, slick, slimy look that this dude was rolling with. Holy smokes.
And that is so 80s. That greasy ponytail. Ooh.
Yeah. Oh, that's very 80s.
Better than the man bun, though. The modern man bun.
The actor here who plays the Ponytail henchman, his name is Brian James. He was a typical, stereotypical 80s bad guy. You may have recognized him. He did appear in Blade Runner. He was actually, I think, a good guy in The Fifth Element. He had a lot of TV roles.
He was the general, I think, in Fifth Element.
Right.
Yeah, he was the general. He put on the Cockney. There's a little story here, is that his role grew. He was originally going to be almost nothing, like a background guy, and he didn't say anything. Director and producer, they saw him, and he has a British accent, and they said, okay, just, you don't need to say much, and you'll just be in a couple of scenes. And then he started playing around, and he put on a Cockney accent, and they said, oh, that's interesting, and his role actually grew much bigger into what you see in the final product here in the movie. So I thought that was kind of interesting. He was originally just going to be a background guy. But let's go back to Perret. I love the first thing that is on his mind is he brings out his mice. And he says, now you understand, you must not kill them. And then Lopez, we're now going to refer to Lopez for the rest of the movie as Gul Dukat, he responds, no, I don't understand. And this is going to be a running gag through the whole movie because they want to kill him. Quan and Lopez want to kill Tango and Cash, but Perret just says, nope, we're going to play a game, and these mice are going to show you how it's done. And he says, quick and easy. That's how you make a cake, but that's not how you run my business.
I love these ridiculous lines that you say in there, and only Jack Palance with that voice could give any credibility to these ridiculous lines from this guy, because I love that quick and easy line. That was fantastic.
Yeah, that's like how you bake a cake, how you clean a toilet bowl, but that's not how you run a multi-million-dollar business. It's so funny. I love it. What did you guys think of these scenes? You could talk about his lair, a little bit more on Quan and Lopez, or Gul Dukat and Jack Palance. Anything else here with his master plan and the mice?
Oh, I think one of the things I love, and this is such an 80s thing, when you get like the bad guy's office, and it looks like the office of a strip club. I love that. It's so ridiculous. But also one of the weird things, like with, like, because it didn't really, I don't know, like there was something weird about the metaphor. He's like, oh, okay, we're going to put them in a maze or jail. He doesn't say that, but he puts the mice in a maze, but he doesn't put them necessarily in a maze. And they are going to die, but he never kills his mice because they are his pets. It's kind of, so like there's some weird things I thought that was kind of going on, but I mean, like he really delivered it well.
Yeah.
And, you know, just the two flunkies hanging around having drinks. Like this scene is, it's just oozing 80s, this whole thing.
It's oozing 80s. It's a stereotype for the genre. How about you, Geoff?
I was just confused with the mice. Like, yeah, like did they forget the second half of the metaphor? I'm with Dukat here. It's like, no, I don't understand either. I don't get it. He just has mice, and he puts them in a maze that he has conveniently built into the bar.
Yeah, he actually has built it into the bar, yeah.
I want that bar.
Like, I was like, is there a snake in there? Is there some cheese? Is there like, what's... No, he just puts them in there, and that's it. Okay, I mean, I was watching this with my girlfriend, and she's like, kind of cowering. She's like, oh, what's he going to do to the mice? I'm like, didn't do anything with the mice. He put them in the fucking thing. That's it.
He didn't do anything.
And that's about as much thought as he put into the plan to frame Tango and Cash. Now that I think of it, it's like,
this is
we're
the
going to
best
put
part.
him in the maze.
That's the best part of this movie. Well, actually, there's a subtle little joke. I don't know if they did it on purpose or not, and I think it's a little brilliant. If you watch the scene again, as he's explaining to Dukat and Quan, he says Tango and Cash have screwed him over about greater than $60 million in drugs, guns. Then he picks up the mice, pauses, and says slightly other, and also slightly various other enterprises. So I got a chuckle.
Mice?
I don't know.
Mouse farms.
I got a chuckle out of that. Like, I was laughing I never picked up on that before, and I was laughing because, like, various other enterprises as he's holding the mice. That was great. It's great timing. Even if probably unintentional, but that was just brilliant.
I wonder if there was something else and he just kind of forgot the line, but he just delivered the flub so well that, like, all right, keep it in, because it kind of worked. It wouldn't surprise me. Also, another thing that I kind of like it's so 80s, the fact that the bad guy's a drug dealer, like just a straight up drug dealer, but also the idea of running guns. I always find kind of weird when I see that, because where are they running the guns to? You know, the US does not seem like a place where, you know, it's hard to get a gun. I'm always confused about the business model of gun running. I see like shipping guns out of the States, but bringing them in seems weird. Do you guys ever like find that that's weird when that's like what the bad guy is doing?
I always just assume that it's an international gun running thing, because yeah, you're right. Like if you,
but he's bringing them in.
Yeah,
and then like later we see those weird like guns that like almost belong in Starship Troopers there at the end.
No, those were those were the phase Watt plasma rifles that Terminator was looking for, right?
It's a phase plasma
phase
rifle.
Plasma rifle. Yeah, with a 40 watt range.
40 watt range.
9 millimeter.
Anyways, I always notice that when that's like what the bad guy is doing is like gun running. It's in the US. Weird.
Yeah, but I think with drugs comes guns and his various other enterprises. Let's move on to the tailing scene. So now we see Tango getting a tip from his captain saying they picked up a phone tap and there's another drug something runner happening, and go tail him and see what you can find out. You get the tailing scene where Tango and Cash are tailing Mr. Ponytail here. They find the dead guy. They get caught by the police, so they're set up. What are your thoughts here on the whole setup, the scene, them meeting the dead guy, the police coming in, all of this stuff?
So at about what minute does this happen in the movie? I mean, we're maybe, 15 minutes in?
You might be 20 minutes
in. Might be 20 minutes? Yeah. I really like the pacing of this movie, and we're just moving forward. I did like their first kind of their exchange, because it's just kind of turns into, you know, this dick measuring contest. And then later they have like almost a literal dick measuring contest. But here I kind of like that interaction with that Macho Man, like you got to one up the other guy each and every time. And Kurt Russell, I feel like really like playing up like being a bit of a Joker sort of type, even though it doesn't really mean anything against Stallone, who's, you know, he's got his own quips and stuff like that. I love that laser sight on that gun. It's like as big as the gun itself.
Yeah, that was awesome.
But I do find this actually, I mean, it is so huge. You know, actually thinking on it, I do kind of like this scene and this setup because it's maybe not terribly unique, but I think the execution of it, of what Jack Palance's character was trying to do and set them up this way, I was like, okay, this is actually pretty clever. This is a good piece of storytelling.
I just love they had instant chemistry as soon as they're on screen together. It's like they're born to be buddy cops, you know? I thought that's what stood out the most to me. The dialogue is cheesy as it is through the whole movie, and they both deliver those lines with enough charisma to sell it. Like you said, they had the one-upsmanship. I thought, it was great. I mean, you know, right there, I can't wait to see them together for the rest of the movie. And yeah, I think the setup was actually somewhat clever. That worked. It played well. Like you kind of follow them down, like they don't know what's going on, and you kind of follow them along through, like, because we don't know what's going to be happening here. We're kind of with them as they're getting framed. We don't know exactly what's going to go. So yeah, good piece of storytelling there as well. And it's a kind of a good way to pivot to the next 2/3 of the movie.
Completely agree. I love this whole scene. The minute they meet, this movie just goes to another level because of their chemistry with each other. They are trying to one-up each other, but the lines, the dialogue is, well, you could say cheesy, but I also think for the time, and it still stands today, I think it's snappy and cheesy witty. You're not talking about, you know, poop jokes. This is pretty witty, right? Like the second best cop in LA. Oh, I heard the same thing about you. Oh, about this gun. Oh, what about that gun? And I love this whole thing. Like, I even love when they get caught. You know, I love Sly, how he says, what did you do? He's like, he wasn't with him the whole time, so he still has his doubts. I love that. And then he goes to the police as they're all there. He goes, I didn't come with this man, and with your permission, I'm leaving this man. Ciao. And I love all that stuff. And then I like how Sly's still true to his character here because he actually asks for a receipt for his gun.
Yeah, that was funny.
That was pretty funny. And then Cash goes, no, I want one too. It's like, this is all really good stuff. And I actually liked the setting where they filmed this. It was kind of appropriate. And I agree with you, Geoff and Nathan. I think the setup is actually pretty good for an 80s movie and a very simplistic movie. This actually works because they actually take time to show that the bad guys are recording their conversation. You see him, Rakeen, pass it to another guy who's going to help set him up. And I loved all of these scenes. And Kurt Russell's charm immediately is just oozing off the screen. Like it's osmosis. Like it's just coming out in spades. And Sly's doing a great job too, but in this scene here, Kurt Russell's just amazing. I just love the smile he always has on his face because he's just playing it for fun. And it's just great. They get arrested, and then now we move into the court proceedings and sentencing, and yay, exposition by newspaper, which is another trope of the genre. What did you think of all of the court proceedings, like the police analyzing the data, them talking about copping a plea, and they have that alone time in that boardroom before they go to trial, and then their admission of guilt, and then they're also talking to themselves, and the puns start coming out now a lot when they start seeing all those other people testifying. So what did you think of all of these scenes?
Yeah, another one of the details that I'd forgotten about it, I actually thought that the courtroom dramatics was very strong. I mean, we see the audio tape expert giving the testimony that, yeah, definitely it's legit. I got no reason to think that it's not.
Yeah, they say he says, I tested it using an oscilloscope.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Sounds
right.
Fancy. I must be right. Fancy. I thought it was interesting that it felt pretty genuine, and you know, like they're quipping behind the scenes, but they both they cop a plea, and like that actually felt very authentic to me, because that's usually what happens in like over 90% of court cases is they cop a plea, even if you're falsely accused. That's what you do so that you don't, so you get reduced jail time. So that's exactly what they did, even though they know they're innocent. They did what they thought they had to do. And, Kurt Russell's outburst in the courtroom there is very endearing. And yeah, he's got the shit-eating grin on his face 26 hours a day, which is fucking fantastic.
I just love how Sly gives this eloquent speech. He's all serious and genuine. And then he sits down, and then the judge says, okay, Mr. Cash, you want to say anything? And he looks at Sly, then smiles with a shit-eating grin. But the best part is as he stands up, Sly goes, no.
Yeah.
He knows he's going to botch it. That's just like the best part. And then I also love how the police behind them, they all cheer after he says this whole thing fucking sucks. It's just, That's such a great moment. I love that moment.
Yeah, excellent moment. So yeah, very well put together, I think, overall.
Yeah, Nathan, how about yourself?
That one sort of last moment there in the court scene, that was like really one of the only times where they try to differentiate the characters a little bit more, was through Stallone's speech and then the outburst from Russell there. I don't know. I'm a little lukewarm on these scenes. They're fine. I'm glad though that it just moved quick and then we were past it very quickly, because I didn't really need to see, because, you need to get him into prison. So I guess you have to sort of show a bit of the court. Later on, there was a thing about their lawyers. So I could never really, thinking back on it, I could never really decide if the lawyers were intentionally doing a shitty job defending them, because you never see their lawyer do anything. Not really. I had to wonder if he was also kind of in on the conspiracy a little bit, but maybe I'm giving the movie too much credit. But I'm just kind of glad that they got past it very, very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, these are quick scenes. I agree with you, Geoff. The speech with Sly or Tango and then Cash's outburst is the highlight of these scenes. I did like their scenes in the boardroom where they were talking to each other as well. The chemistry is there, and I love their banter. The puns start coming out as the people are testifying here. The Job of the Hut, the chainsaw, the beer, I'm going to rip his tongue out with the tow truck, and all that stuff. I thought that was a little much. And that's something that's going to continue through the rest of the movie, especially in the last act.
They're cops, man. They torture people. That's their thing.
That's their thing, yeah. I mean, some of it's funny, but some of it gets trying. But I want to ask you guys a question. When the Asian guy is on the Asian assassin, he's on the stand, and he's speaking in Chinese, and he has an interpreter. Cash gets upset and says, "This square crow can talk." Did I get that right? What the fuck does that mean? What's a square crow?
I don't know. I don't remember the line.
It's probably the only way that they could, it's not really like a racial slur, but it almost sounds like it could be one, but they didn't actually want to. The only racial slur I think I heard in the movie is that Stallone's captain calls him a wop early on in the movie. And so I think that I noticed it too, and I thought it was odd. I sort of thought, okay, this is just a way to throw some sort of not quite racial slur at the character. Because otherwise it means nothing. I mean, it's such a weird line.
It is. So now they're guilty, so they get sent to prison. Let's talk about their time in prison, not their escape. Let's talk about when they first realize they are in a maximum security prison instead of a minimum security one. Something happened. They realize they're getting screwed. And all their time there, including that boiler room or laundry room fight, and they're getting tortured at the end. Let's not talk about the escape. We can save that for after. So let's talk about these scenes here. Nathan, how about you start first?
Well, I like how they show up, and at first I'm like, is there a prison riot already in progress? and the guards
shit's
are
on fire and stuff already.
Shit's on fire, and the guards are so blasé about it. It's kind of weird that they're sort of playing it up for jokes, but going into a max security prison and you're a cop, it's kind of a scary thing. The other thing, and this happens kind of before they get into the general population, but when they're trying to figure out who set them up, it's kind of strange that they're all now they're kind of having that conversation now that they've been convicted, and they're having this, weird shower scene together. And that's another thing from the 80s. First, you got butts out in full force from the male stars, and simultaneously a bit of weird gay panic also going on, which is also very 80s sort of thing as well. And could we say the finest performance by Clint Howard?
Oh man, Clint Howard.
Yeah, Clint Howard. Corbinite maneuver.
I mean, I know he's I killed my best friend, and he points, and the newspaper budget for this movie is out of control because the wall is covered in newspapers. We've already seen 20 newspapers.
Well, crazy people.
And the newspaper article he points to says "Man kills best friend." I thought it was so funny. It's weird. It's odd that this should be almost like a weird panic thing in any other movie, but they are still playing it for jokes. I kind of love that actually. They could have gone that the other way of we're really up shit creek here, and they kind of still cracking wise. I kind of liked that. And up to the fight?
Include the fight.
Oh, okay. So the fight, this is actually one of the few things that I did remember all these years later, especially Stallone's, when they sort of start off the fight and he's got that great jump kick, almost like a crane kick to the one guy. Maybe it doesn't really stand the test of time, but I thought that, okay, it's moving along and they got a couple of moves in there. And I had a really weird Batman vibe when Jack Palance came out because it kind of looks like Axis Chemicals a little bit.
It does,
that was
actually.
one of the
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's kind of unfortunate with some of these movies that like the fighting and the action doesn't really hold up. But one of the things that really struck me was that I'd like to go and maybe watch like a few more movies around this era, because I kind of am getting the feeling that this was also the start where action stars started incorporating more what you would consider martial arts fighting, right? Because Stallone's got a couple of open hand strikes. He does that later as well. You know, he's got the kicks. Kurt Russell, not so much, but I noticed like that fight style from Stallone. And I really thought, wow, like I never really thought of Stallone as like, and he never was a martial arts guy.
No, it's this role only. And that's something that's unique to this character, even on the, superficial level of just the style of fighting. And I would think,
I thought it was interesting actually, because it's like, wow, like I didn't really, even though I remembered the kick, it's weird because I swear it must be in like one of the trailers or something like that. But I felt like that was pretty dramatic. After they punched Ponytail there, and then that's when he lets loose with. I really noticed that really stood out to me, his fight style.
I think that it was interesting for them to make the point that Cash it was fine they were going to kill him. He just didn't want to get killed by an immigrant. And
I love that line. Probably one of my favorite lines in the movie. Pull the motherfucker for all I care. Just don't let him do it. American jerk off, not a limey jerk off.
Hilarious.
Yeah, I love it. That's so funny. It's great.
I thought the fight was well choreographed, and the fact that they did differentiate their fighting styles, I thought was a nice detail. Tango's still the more refined guy. He's doing the martial arts. Like, he's a trained fighter. He's doing the moves, and Cash is more of the barroom brawler style. So that's a neat detail to put into a movie like this, because it doesn't need that detail. So, a little bit extra effort is good. I mean, I want to talk about the shower scene. I just don't know how to start. I mean, it was funny, and I loved Kurt Russell's line. Like, oh, you don't know shit.
That was funny. Yeah, I love the way he delivers it. It's great.
Yeah. So good. It's just so weird that, like, okay, they're in the shower, naked, showering together. They make the drop the soap joke, sort of.
But wait, hold on. What is the joke? Because the joke is that the guy bending over is the one who's going to get violated.
Yeah, so if anybody's like, don't flatter yourself.
He's going down in front of Sly to get the soap.
Right.
So the implication that he's going to go down and like give him a blowjob there?
Yes.
It's so bizarre.
That's why he says, don't flatter yourself, Pee-wee.
Oh.
The immediate comeback, because Pee-wee's hilarious as well on a simpler level. I love the comeback from Sly. It's like, well, I don't know you that well. This is probably my favorite part of the movie, is the entire prison sequence, including the fight. I just want to first mention like how ridiculous it is for Perret to successfully intercept their transfer from the courthouse or wherever they were, police headquarters, to a minimum security prison, arranging the entire maximum security prison facility so they can actually slip by everybody and pay everybody off so they could stay there, arrange how they can hire or pay off all of these thugs to beat them up or kill them, and the electrocution and all of this stuff, yet he doesn't put that effort into managing his drug shipments.
Yeah.
I just thought I'd point that out.
Well, maybe it's more his area of expertise.
Yes.
He's been practicing with those mice all this time, so he knows how to do that part.
There's that fascination with mice. I mean, I'm not sure what's going on here. But I love the immediate reaction here from Cash when the gates open. He goes, they're all sweating and everything like that. He goes, I don't think there's a golf course here. It's like... And then, the shower scene. I think it's really snappy dialogue here. All of this humor, even though it's juvenile, it works. It just really works. And it's because they work playing off each other. And then I love how at the end, Tango says, no, they're not going to put us in general population. And then you get that litter and fire scene, how they're in general population. And let's just talk about, this is one of my favorite sequences in the movie with respect to all of these lines from all the prison inmates. Like the black guy says, I'm going to put brown sugar in your ass. And then we get Conan the Barbarian. This actor with a massive jaw, there's a little piece of trivia. His name is Robert Zadar, and he was in a lot of movie roles, B-movie roles. You probably didn't see him in many major movie roles, but he was the star of a trilogy where he was the hero. It was called Maniac Cop. Where he was killed by bad guys, comes back from the dead, and instills his jawline justice. So
Wait, is that literally the tagline? Jawline justice?
no, I made that up.
Oh, okay.
That's pretty good, man. You should sell that.
I should. But speaking of his jaw, he had a medical condition called, and I may be pronouncing this wrong, shrubrism, which is an enlarged jawline. There's fluid in the jaw there. This guy, actually, he may be my favorite side character in the entire movie because he just enjoys being bad in every single scene he is in. He's enjoying them being tortured. He's enjoying laughing. I love the intro scene here. If you recall, he was the guy who fell out of the truck in the opening sequence as well. That's why he has a beef with Tango.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, because he goes, fuck you. And he goes, oh, you like jewelry? That's that one, the truck driver.
Right.
So he goes, bring them to me. And then you get the
Oh,
Conan
that
the
was
Barbarian
incredible.
scene. That was such
incredible.
a great line. And the way he's looking behind the bars, it's so funny. He's just so intense and his eyes are bulging out of its sockets so much. I just love it. He goes, yes! I remember you from Conan the Barbarian. An obvious nudge at Arnie there, and I just loved it. If you need me and my ass will be in the neighborhood. I love that scene.
I wish he was in the movie more, to be honest. Like,
yeah.
I thought he was great.
He was great. And then, but the best part is they're walking away. The guy goes, you fucking pig! It's over for you! And then Cash goes, I see you're going to be very popular here. These scenes are just great. Then you got the cellmates. You talked about Clint Howard and then the big black guy. And I love Cash's reaction. That is yours. So,
Yeah.
so funny. I love all of these scenes. And then we get the laundry room fight, which I love. I love the build up. I love the tension. I love how Rakeen, ponytail guy, he's going to threaten to cut their throats, and then you get the bowl the motherfucker for all I care and the, immigrant jerk off and all that stuff. I love all of these scenes. And then FUBAR and don't panic. I'm panicking. I love all of these scenes, and it's so good. And then you get Conan coming in, and Sly goes, "Oh shit, it's Conan!" And you broke that jaw. And then it's actually a good fight, and I agree with you guys. There's a difference in their fighting styles, and the fight is long enough before it gets too long, because they played it kind of semi-realistic. It's the fact that there's just too many of them, and they did get overwhelmed. But I love the ending part of that, is that as they're getting overwhelmed, you still hear them saying, "Don't panic!" They just keep playing that joke. It's so great. And then they get the electrocution scene, and again, I just love how this Conan the Barbarian, guys, he's just enjoying every single minute of it. He's the biggest cheerleader. Yeah! Fried Tango! I love it. It's so great. This guy's just enjoying every single minute of screen time he's in. So then the cops eventually do come in. I don't know how the hell they didn't manage to come in before, and this Matt guy appears to know Cash, and then he suggests to them to escape. And then they get the prison escape sequence here. So let's talk about the entire setup for the prison escape and them escaping and Sly fighting Conan the Barbarian again and all of these things. Yeah, talk about everything, the entire prison escape sequence.
For the most part, I think it's a very strong piece of the movie. I mean, the whole prison thing from start to finish is definitely the strongest part of the movie. And the escape, I think, is also very strong. But I was a little bit confused at the logistics. So Cash goes through the ventilation fan there in order to meet his friend who's now dead on the other side. So it's like it's a trap, right? They're going to ambush him. So he escapes back out of the ventilation system. And then I must have missed something, because then they still make it. Was there always a plan to make it to the roof?
There was a mention of two ways to go.
Right.
When his friend was showing him the map, and then Stallone was like, "Why don't we go this way?" Looks easy. Like, no, that's a long way around. You don't want it.
Okay, all right. That's cleared up. That's fine. Okay, so then it's great. Yeah, I don't have any problem. It was lots of tension. Thought this worked really, really well. I mean, it's a little maybe overly dramatic with the heavy rainfall and everything, but I thought it was well shot with them, using the belts to slide down the power line there. I thought that worked really well. And it sort of made sense. Maybe we're kind of jumping ahead that, as soon as they get out, as soon as they land, it's like, hey, we're going our separate ways. Like, we're going to split up. It had a sort of a note of authenticity. To me, it's not like, well, now we're sticking together to bring down the bad guys. It's like, all right, we're getting the fuck out of here. See ya.
Yeah.
That was great. Great tension. Very well filmed. I thought it was really good.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was a nice tension to it. I did kind of laugh when Kurt Russell, like after Stallone rescues him, and he's like, he's talking about how he found his friends. Like, they cut his what did he say? They cut his throat, ear to ear. Know what I mean? It's like, yeah, that's not a metaphor. That's literally what you do.
Yeah.
But the other thing I kind of liked was sort of the final fight between Conan the Barbarian and Rambo there. I thought that was actually like a pretty neat fight because Stallone is losing the whole time. And it's like, you look at, he's got like I don't know where the claw and chain came from exactly, but I was like, oh, I kind of like this. And again, like that actor is so great. I thought it was like a really
grappling hook.
Yeah, it was so weird. This was actually one of the other things I kind of remembered was the last part of the escape of going, shimmying through like just random electrical, I don't know what those are, but, and then escaping with the belts on the cable and stuff like that. I thought like really cool. I think in the 80s, like, I mean, probably when I saw this the first time in the 90s, like, oh, this is great. I think it still works. Like as a piece of action, I mean, this stands up today, I think.
I would definitely agree with you guys. This is a tense and exciting, fun sequence, which is still serious, but lighthearted in a way. I love the settings and the lighting. I know it's heavy with rain and thunder and lightning, which is a definite trope, but I did enjoy the settings they had here. I like how Tango saves Cash. It's a nice little moment. The showdown with Conan the Barbarian was a little disappointing for me, but it was a good death because I love how in the midst of him dying and being electrocuted, he's still able to manage to scream out, Tango! But it's kind of funny. I didn't notice this again until this time because I'm paying even more attention, is that Conan, as he has him with the grappling hook, he's obsessed with animal fetish as well. Like he's calling Tango a dog, calls him doggy.
Oh, that's right.
Doggy, puppy, scream, all of these things. I was thinking, what is going on with the writer? What's happening here? Like something is happening. Mice, dogs. You know, you love mice, you hate dogs. What's going on? I'm not sure. And when they jump and do the zip lining, I thought that was fantastic. But what's with the bicycle kicks while guys zip line all the way down? You think that would actually... Did you notice both stuntmen were doing the totally bicycle kicks? That, yeah. Like, is that just for flair for the film? Or
yeah, he's having fun.
You would think you wouldn't be doing that. This is not ziplining in Mexico. This is, you want to make the least amount of visual distraction as possible. And you don't
I actually kind of wonder if the guy's completely still, like if he's just sort of like in an L sit and his legs are up or something like that. I kind of wonder if people would think, ooh, you know what? People might, when they watch this, they might just think we just strapped a mannequin on there and zipped it down. So it's like, oh, maybe if you just like move around a little bit just to show that it's like a real stunt.
Maybe that's
I don't know.
You're
maybe
probably
a
right.
theory.
You're probably right. That's probably what it is. Yeah, but I enjoyed these scenes a lot, even though, the electrocution power lines and the falling great distances from the power line all the way to the ground is a bit
onto your back.
Yeah, a bit of a stretch. All he got was like a little bit of a slip disc, and that's it. And Tango suffered nothing except holding his stomach for a second. So, but again, it's a movie to begin with, and it's the genre, so you're not really supposed to think too much about it. So it's fine. But now we cut to what may be my favorite scene in the movie. Because we cut to Perret. He's a little disheartened. He gets a phone call from both Juan and Lopez at the same time, and he says, "Oh yeah, put him on." And then Juan says, "Sir, we really have to do something. We need to think." And then he cuts him off, and he says, "There you go again. Always thinking. That will be your downfall." And he says it with such conviction. I love it. It's great.
His delivery on that is so amazing.
Yeah, he's a loon. This guy's awesome. Perret's got to be one of the best. He's like one of those hidden villain gems that nobody talks about. Like, this guy should be talked about a lot more. I love Perret. He's great. He's turning into be one of my favorite movie villains of all time.
I want to know who was working the camera on that video call. Like,
yes, I was just about to
the
say
other
the
hand,
same thing.
Zooming in, he's got the lighting and everything. I mean,
doing the camera moves, like it goes into one guy's face, comes back out, goes into the cot.
Just insane. But yeah, I mean, Perret should be the last boss in Mike Tyson's Punch Out, not Mike Tyson. That's how spectacular a villain this guy is. I mean, he's totally absurd. Yeah, I love this scene here. Like, they try to be futuristic. Is this a technology they actually were flirting with? The video call on the bank of CRT monitors here. I mean, it's insane. Again, like the 80s villain layer. I mean, yeah, it's so ludicrous, but
it's a great
fantastic.
Set, yeah, ludicrous.
Yeah,
but it's a great set.
I love this scene. I mean, and Jack Palance, like his delivery, in the hands of any other actor, it probably would have fallen a little bit flat. His delivery is so great. And then I kind of like after that, after the call's done, he brings out the mice and he's kind of playing with them again. I forget what he says, but it's so bizarre. It's so weird. It's so great.
Yeah, it's a short scene, but it stands out for me as one of the highlights of the film for sure. I just love that line. So now we're going to start to get into more of the last act of the movie. I wouldn't say third act, but close to the third act. This sequence here might be some of the more weaker scenes of the movie. We have Cash going to Owen. So now you get this Q-Bond relationship, but how should I put Owen? He's a little special. I'm not sure. I don't know what you guys thought of these scenes. Like, why did they put this here? And the need for it as well. And then they start going around and proving their innocence. So Stallone sees the FBI guy. Cash sees the sound guy named Skinner. And then you get the dance club, where after obtaining the tapes to prove the forgery, the audio forgery, Cash goes to Cleopatra's, which is the dance club that Tango told him to go if he's in hot water. There he meets Terry Hatcher's Catherine. And you get all this dance stuff and everything like that. So let's talk about all of these scenes as a whole.
Is the LAPD that kind of an operation where they have a Q division? Yeah, with basically, Q's special ed younger brother running the joints. I mean, come on. That dog?
Our tax dollars going to these devices.
Oh, man. I mean, I think this is one of those scenes that might be betraying some of the production and script difficulties that this film had that you described, Harry, because this doesn't fit.
No, it doesn't. This feels really out of place compared to the rest of the movie.
Time.
I don't know why they put this stuff in here, and I think it's only to give them that accessibility to the RV from hell so they can have that truck chase, and that's probably it.
And even that, and we'll get to that, even that is sort of incongruent with the rest of the film, right? So the whole third act is feeling just out of step with what we've seen so far. I mean, everything so far has been ridiculous, but it's been ridiculous within, its own band. And this is just going outside. It's just going out of bounds with this Q stuff.
This could be John Peters' influence. Who knows if this is his, as I mentioned.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Well, because John Peters is kind of legendary for being batshit insane and wanting just the weirdest shit thrown into the third acts of his movies. So that would certainly be a logical explanation. Cleopatra's is an interesting club. I mean, I don't know much about the club scene of the 80s in Los Angeles there. It's not really a strip club. I don't really know what's going on here.
You got even a guy on a motorcycle on the stage. I wanted to see his act.
Yeah, exactly. Come on, Terry, get the hell off of Terry Hatcher. I want to see this guy on the motorcycle.
To an extent. We don't know what he's doing with that motorcycle, so let's not get carried away.
A lot more death-defying than the glitter and crimped hair of Terry Hatcher, but, it's okay. Are we stopping here, or are we getting into the Kurt Russell and heels and drag?
You can go up to the drag scene. Yes.
Yeah, so, I mean, I had a good laugh seeing him in there because he's just hamming it up and having a great time doing it. So, that was good. I don't know if there's any deeper social commentary to be had there where they're both...
No, these are just cheap laughs.
They are cheap laughs, but I like how she, like Terry Hatcher's kind of playing the butch and then Kurt Russell's, her girlfriend in drag. Like it, I don't know. It's entertaining. It's funny.
The best part of that scene is that the cop still doesn't care. He asks, is there any chance of a three-way?
Yeah. Hey, man, you never know until you try.
Yeah. How about you, Nathan?
Yeah, a lot of these scenes, again, were not... It's funny. These were not things I remembered. And so when he goes into... When we turn to like a weird James Bond movie here with this Q character, or it's Owen, right? Is the character's name? I was like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, I was so confused all of a sudden. Like, what is this? It is out of place. And Geoff, I think you're right. Like, this must be the opposing forces of like, oh, we want this to be a less serious, more of a comedy sort of thing. With the dog, I mean, it's so bizarre, because then it also links back to the boot gun, right? Because he says that's who had built the boot gun for him, right? So the other thing I love, and this is such an 80s thing, the idea of modern contemporary dance as a profession for people. Yeah. And as far as the motorcycle act, I don't know, like he's got like a 50s, like he rolled out of Grease, then he came out of like a Stargate. So I don't know if he's doing like a bit of a mashup there or something like that. Terry Hatcher's dance.
It was so incoherent.
It's so weird. It is. She's all over the place.
Yeah.
And you can tell, I can so tell when it's like the double versus her. She gets the drumsticks with this, and then the drum appears out of nowhere, but then she's not drumming in tune to anything, and I swear the sound mix is a little bit off, where like she's just kind of drumming in the air, and then there's these sounds.
You
that
are 100% correct.
Happening out of sync.
She is out of sync, and it has nothing to do with the music or the act or anything. She's just doing it randomly.
It is so bizarre. It is so weird. And the idea of like, she's just like a dancer. She's not a stripper, but a dancer. It's so weird. I don't know what that club is, because it's also a fully mixed clientele as well. I mean, it's so strange. But the drag scene is great. I did actually, when it's like, oh yeah, now I do kind of remember that. I kind of am disappointed they didn't maybe have a little bit more fun with it, because I feel like Kurt Russell's the kind of actor like who would do a whole movie in drag. If you let him,
maybe.
But those cops are fucking idiots, because there's no way that like he doesn't have any sleeves, he is fucking built in that scene. Like there's no way.
He calls him, oh, so you're an aerobic instructor. That's how they got out of it.
Yeah,
and that's is that what that line was?
Yeah, because he says
because the cop said that.
That horny cop sizes Cash up in drag. Obviously, he thinks it's a woman and says, oh, so an aerobic instructor, huh? And
okay. Now I get it, because I was like, well, I missed something here. But the other thing that made me laugh was when Kurt Russell turned, where I guess they both turned and flicked their cigarettes at the cop in tandem. I really laughed at that. And then, the classic, I mean, you've seen it a million times now, where he kind of pulls the sunglasses down and flips him the bird, putting it back up. Is like, I mean, I really laughed at this. I mean, it's kind of like, I feel sort of bad doing it, because they're sort of making, a bit of a joke at, cross-dressing and, and lesbians and stuff like that. It's like, you couldn't do that scene now, I don't think.
Yeah.
Again,
Not
this is still very 80s.
Depends on the genre. I think Tyler Perry pretty much does this in every single fucking...
Well, that's a whole nother thing. Yeah, where like the Medea movies you're talking about.
I have no idea what they are. I've just seen poster of him dressing as a woman. That's it. That's all I know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go into those movies. But regardless. Yeah, I agree with you guys. Bond scenes and Owen, they really put me off. They're really bizarre. They don't really belong. What do you guys think of the proving innocent scenes? You guys didn't mention Stallone visiting the FBI guy, or Cash
there's so much to talk about.
Yeah,
here.
or Cash visiting the sound guy. Because I love when, you got some bad puns here. You get, you can laugh at it, but they're also bad. So like Tango goes, you're looking terribly anemic. Maybe you need some more iron in your diet. As he, cocks his gun at him and stuff like that. But I do like the line that comes after. That's a bad line, but then the FBI goes, oh, it doesn't matter. They want to kill me. My life ain't worth shit. And then the Tango goes, well, that's true. So I love that. And then you get the Skinner guy. Cash is just, blowing up his lab and all this stuff. What'd you think of these scenes?
The Stallone scene, I don't know. I mean, the line that he delivers with more iron, I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. It was pretty groan-worthy.
Yeah, that's one of probably the worst pun in the movie.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not a good line, and he didn't deliver it well, I don't think. I mean, he did the best he could with what he got. I don't know, a bit of a throwaway scene. I did kind of like the scene with the sound guy. I also another thing I laughed at, when the character's name is Skinner, I think, right? And he's on the street. You see him walking on the street. He walks into his place, and the sign literally just says Sound Lab on the outside. So I'm like, guys, come on, you could. But there's like some weird like styled letters behind it, but then just like a white border, Sound Labs. Like, you guys could have come up with something. And I mean, it's fine. I mean, Kurt Russell, I mean, he's going to, deliver his lines really well and stuff like that. But I thought it was kind of odd that they sort of blow across these scenes very, very quickly. Because usually that's in a type of movie like this, is what you would do is to redeem themselves. Much of the movie is going to be that. And really, we only get essentially these two scenes to try and gather evidence. I mean, a little bit in the scene kind of following at the house, I guess, but not really. So I thought it was kind of odd that they condensed this down. I really wonder if there had been more stuff that was shot with the original director, who was like trying to make a bit more of a serious movie. And I wonder if some of that stuff went to the wayside. I kind of feel like the overall narrative, these scenes they're kind of necessary, but they're mashed together with these other kind of superfluous scenes, right? The dance club scene probably could have been, well, I don't know about condensed. I think they should have just lost the Q scene, and they could have maybe had a little bit better flow there from when they separate to trying to figure out their predicament.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he could have just had Cash say, go back to the house if he gets into trouble. Anyways, because they eventually go back there anyways, so regardless, it doesn't matter. I'll chime in too. It's just quickly, quickly is that, yeah, I don't mind the scenes where they're going to try and prove their innocence. Couple of nice moments there for each of the heroes, but the dance club scene is just absolutely terrible. Not a fan of Cash and Drag, but I do agree with you, Nathan. I did like the scene where Catherine and Cash flick their cigarettes at the horny cop there, and I just love how that horny cop, he won't stop doing anything until he gets laid, so that's pretty funny. So back at the house, I guess it's Tango's house, but Catherine's renting it out. You see Tango walking in on the massage that she's giving Cash. What did you think of these scenes? Not just specifically the massage, but later you get some interplay and some dialogue, some down moments between Catherine and Cash, and then you also get some brother-sister moments between, and that revelation that they're brother-sister between Terry Hatcher and Stallone, and then you also get more dialogue and banter between Tango and Cash in these scenes. What did you think of all this? And then the captain comes and gives them the lead to Ponytail. We won't talk about the Ponytail interrogation, but how about we start here?
I fucking hated the massage thing. Like, it really bugged me. I'll come back to it in a second, but like some of the other stuff
just the jokes, the sexual innuendo or misinterpretation from Tango? That's what you're talking about?
Yeah, because the setup is just so dumb, I thought. I kind of get the joke and what they're trying to do here, but I don't know. There's something that was so irksome to me about the setup for the joke. So he walks in thinking that, like he's fucking my sister. But then it's so dumb because they played it in a way, so from Stallone's perspective, but what is she getting excited for? It's just, I'm not joking here. Like, this really bothered me quite a bit.
What is she getting excited for?
Yeah.
Because of the massage.
Cartilage is going
right?
bad.
Yeah.
Like, it's so fucking stupid. It really did bother me because they kind of worked backwards from, they wanted to have a certain joke. Oh, he's going to walk in, he's going to think it's some sort of sexual situation, and he's kind of dumbfounded a little bit. And then, of course, like, they have the scene with the captain there, like, where they think like like an assassin or whatever through the window or something like that. But it sort of feels like a piece of writing where they wanted to have a bit of a sexy scene. They got the massage thing going on. It's like, okay, well, we want to kind of we need like a way to kind of reveal the sister aspect, but also still kind of playing up the angle that it might be the girlfriend. There's something about it, I can't put my finger on it, that just really bugged me about the way they led to it. After that, actually, he runs through like the door there and tackles the captain and everything like that, and Kurt Russell comes out, and I thought a bit of that interplay there. And then I think the final reveal of it being the sister and that interplay and some of that dialogue worked really well. And then some of the band, Terry Hatcher comes in. The three of them actually, like the three together, actually, I thought had pretty good chemistry, and the banter that was going back and forth between all three.
I actually agree. I'll touch on that later. How about you, Geoff?
Well, the situation is a bit of an eye roller. It's a little over elaborate because they have to get Terry Hatcher in order for the joke to work, right? For Sly to come in and see it and like get the wrong idea, she's got to oversell the fact that she's enjoying giving him the massage. Like, it's dumb. I mean, it doesn't bother me as much as it bothers Nathan, but it is definitely dumb. The jokes later, they could have done a million different things there. I think that would have played a little bit better than how they landed on it, but I don't know, whatever. I guess it's okay. Once all said and done, the three of them have good chemistry together, which, I mean, that's a tough dynamic to sell. And Terry Hatcher does a good job. I mean, you've got Stallone, Kurt Russell, and you've got Terry Hatcher, who's been
in one movie.
In what, one movie and a couple of chewing gum commercials, probably. I mean, like, that's all, and she's right in there holding her own. So I think she did a pretty good job, and that trio works for the little time we see them together.
And I completely agree. The massage sex setup, I don't really care that it was a little over the top and dumb, because it really wasn't too much of a focus for me. It was a dumb joke, but I liked the talk that they have prior to then, because it's still a little ambiguous, because Cash is trying to feel her out in a sense. Is she really dating? Because he thinks she's dating Tango and all these things. So I liked some of that dialogue there, but I agree with you. The minute that the revelation is revealed, it actually gets pretty good between Tango and Cash. And I also like the brother-sister banter about the rent in the house. And he goes, "Excuse me, are you not staying at my house? Oh, and besides, you owe me rent." And all of these kind of things. And then Tango's saying, "Oh, well, Cash, I've never really hit somebody in my life, even though I understood that," as he's hit plenty of people in this movie prior to then. But he says, "I'm proud of the fact I've never punched anybody out, except Peretz men."
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm going to nail you through the goddamn lawn. I love the way he says some of these things. There's a lot of good jokes and banter here, and they're still playing off each other. I agree. I think Terry Hatcher is doing a really good job, considering this is one of her earlier roles here. And then I even like some of the brother-sister honest discussion later, because, you know, the movie's been so quick and fast, they just need a bit of a breather before they go into the third act. We've talked about this many times before on other movies, so there's a reason why this is a little bit of a slower pace and they need a little bit of a breather. And I thought this discussion here about him worrying about her, I love the joke he still adds. He's still thinking financials, you know, if you need help, I can, you know, get you to invest in a bond. 7.25% yield. Big money.
It's a pretty good bond yield, by the way, in case anybody's wondering.
It's the 80s. Mortgage rates at this time.
Exactly.
Like,
inflation was like 20%.
7.25% yield. I'd love that. It's a great line, though.
Yeah, it's a good line, yeah.
But another bad pun, when he notices the guy stalking in the backyard and he doesn't know it's a scap and he goes, freeze, sleaze bag, and then he does this, I thought I laughed pretty hard there. I thought it was pretty funny. The bad pun came from the captain. He goes, is this...
Oh, best pun.
Best pun? Is this the way you screen all your guests?
Oh, so good.
It fits in the movie, right? So Captain gives them the tip about Ponytail, so they go off and interrogate Ponytail. They capture him, lure him out as bait in his apartment in a hotel, and then they take him to the roof and they do the rooftop interrogation. What do you guys think of the Ponytail interrogation?
I guess the guy, because they'd already, he had a bloody nose, so they had already roughed him up a little bit. And it's like, yeah, throw me off, I don't care, kind of thing. And it was I couldn't really tell if he was the bravado, if he really thought that maybe they wouldn't, or he's like, I'm so tough that I'm not afraid to die. So I couldn't really decide between the two. And then some of the banter here between the two characters breaks down for me a little bit, because I thought their bad cop, worse cop thing, I don't know, there was something weird. I understood what they were trying to do to try and bring it out, and I don't think that they were trying to necessarily fool the audience with this, but I thought that they could have had a little bit more fun with it, because suddenly all the humor was completely gone from it, even though you get the crazy wild eyes from Stallone, which I loved. Yeah, I don't know how to feel about this scene. I mean, it was sort of necessary, but I can't really decide if it worked for me or not.
I actually liked the scene. I thought it worked well for me, because it felt, maybe authentic is not quite the right word, but Kurt Russell is overplaying, being I'm not going down for this. I think he's selling it well. We know that they're just playing the game in order to get the confession, but he's selling it in sort of the right amount so the bad guy kind of buys it. I don't know that he would, but he's got that jerk off ponytail, so I figure anything's possible. But they have, like you said before, Harry, that this guy put on the Cockney accent, and they're like, oh, that's interesting, so they gave him more lines. But every line is such a cliche Cockney accent line. Every single word out of his mouth is this is the Cockney dictionary and all the bullshit words.
But it's so great.
It's so ludicrous. I mean, overall, the scene's fun. I think it works generally, especially considering kind of what's surrounding it, where we're going. This is a little more consistent with the tone of the movie that's been enjoyable to this point. And it's sort of an oasis, because shit starts to go upside down pretty quick after this.
Yeah, I agree. I'm also semi-mixed on this scene. There's actually 3 parts here. There's the first part where they capture Ponytail and start hanging him upside down. Then there's the bad cop, worse cop part with the grenade. And then there's the aftermath when they're just talking about Cash nailing the sister. So I love the first and the third part. I agree with you guys. I agree with you, Nathan, that the second part where they're the psycho cop, bad cop, worse cop part kind of feels a little forced. And maybe the setup really wasn't there. I'm 100% aligned with how you feel there. I also, even though I like how Tango's playing it, he's a little crazy, wide-eyed, he's, ready to go. But yeah, a little overplayed. But I love the first part, because I love Brian James, the Ponytail guy. I love the Cockney stuff. Up yours, asshole. You ain't worth a toss. It's so... it's so...
I always laughed when he talks. I agree, Geoff. It's over the top, but I mean, I was like, oh, I love this.
But then I love, immediately after, they're about to high-five, they stop, and then Tangle pulls back and goes, do you fuck my sister? That banter will continue for a little bit more in the movie, and I thought that was a strong end to this scene as well. I was a fan overall. So then let's cut to now. We're back at Special Q headquarters and the RV from hell. So they get the truck. So let's talk about this scene quickly. Geoff, go ahead.
This is pretty terrible, in all honesty. I didn't like this at all. I mean, it's completely out of nowhere. And if that's not bad enough, then I don't think we saw... I mean, I know we've seen the inside of the bad guy's lair, but we didn't see the outside, I don't think. So it's just some rock quarry.
Well, we're not going to get to the actual action scene yet. How about just at the Q's headquarters and them getting the RV. Then we'll move to the infiltration.
Okay, yeah. So, no, this is pretty ridiculous. To me, I don't really have anything else to say. I didn't like this part at all. It's too far elite from where we've been so far, I think. Like, nothing's been... I know we've already been introduced to Q and all the gadgets and stuff, but it's not consistent with the rest of the movie. As silly as it's been, it doesn't make any sense.
I agree with Geoff. I mean, it's a short scene, but it's from a different movie. It feels very 80s as well to have like the souped up truck with all these weapons. But then when I really thought about it, like other than the A-Team, like which was much like earlier 80s, I think, like I was just wondering, like with the filmmakers, were they thinking like, oh yeah, like people are gonna love like this vehicle? And so I'm a little bit puzzled. I understand like they wanted to do that last big action piece there, but when they were conceiving of this, I would love to know like how they got to this point where like, okay, we'll put him in like this souped up super truck that apparently also has like a computer in it that you'd never really see. The thing that was also weird about is like they went back there and like were they called back? I don't remember now. Like did Owen call them to come there, or they thought, we got a buddy.
No, they just
go to him.
They just cut to the scene. They just cut to the scene. That's it.
Was there any lead up to say he can find out information for us?
No. So what happens is during this scene, as they're leaving with the truck, Cash asks him to investigate the information on the base, and then they talk to Owen on the drive there. Okay.
All right. Thank you. No, yeah, that part I remember. But then as the scene unfolded, I'm like, wait, why are they here again?
Just to get the truck.
I guess it's so out of place and it's from a different movie.
I agree. Terrible scene. We don't need to talk about it any further. It's just there so they can get the RV from hell. I mean, I do like the fact that it's bulletproof. It's got its own chain minigun, and I think there's one line, I can't remember who says it. He goes, who owns the pink slip? Satan?
Oh yeah, that was pretty funny.
That was a great line, but aside from that, I didn't like the scene at all. I didn't like the character of Owen either. I think they could have massaged this to still get a truck like this to help them infiltrate the base and have a little bit of a truck chase, but let's move on. So let's talk about
that. Should have been Clint Howard character. They should have he should have broken him out, and then he's got he was like a crazy inventor on the outside too. And then,
that's a great idea, especially to get Clint Howard more screen time, because crazy people aren't afraid of anybody. The next scene here, they infiltrate the base, and you get the truck chase here. Let's talk about everything outside before they go inside. So, Geoff, you start.
Yeah, okay. Well, as I was starting before, so the drug dealer, is this the payoff, the end result to being a crime lord, drug dealer, gun runner, is that you get to have a sweet pad inside of a fucking rock quarry, and then you got to have all these metal band rejects driving.
He's digging for mice.
Digging for mice, yeah. He's got all these metal band rejects with motorcycles and like these armored cranes. This is just, not only is it absurd, it's not very well filmed either, I don't think. I mean, I don't get a good sense of, like, it's not exciting or cool with the car chase or anything like that. I mean, I guess they got the minigun on the truck, but other than that, I mean, they had to abandon ship there at one point, right? To get into the big rock crunchers there. So, I mean, that's kind of where a cheap 80s supervillain would have his lair, I guess. I mean, it's a step up from an abandoned warehouse on the docks, but other than that, it's kind of a silly setting for the end here, I think.
How about you, Nathan? Everything on the outside.
Everything on the outside. One of my pet peeves in movies, to me, it seems like shows like a lack of creativity amongst filmmakers, and also like maybe a sign of a cheap movie sometimes, is when they film shit in a rock quarry. It's just uncreative and it doesn't fit. Yeah, it's like, why is he out there? And there's also another couple of things, like right when they're kind of on the ridge before they have the big action piece. I noticed, I wonder if this again was like part of the reshoots that they went through to kind of try and fix the ending, because there's a bunch of VO where Owen is talking to them, I guess, on the computer, and they're talking back to him, and then they have a little bit of dialogue out on the ridge, and then when they get back, as soon as their back's turned, then there's more VO that I imagine they're like, we don't know what's going on here, like, why are they here, kind of thing. And I think Owen said that it was supposed to be an abandoned airfield. So why was it a rock quarry? It's so bizarre.
I told you, he turned the airfield into a rock quarry.
Yeah,
for mice.
Yep, for mice.
The hunt is on.
Oh, Jesus. But then, of course, like the dumbest thing is that the fact that the bad guys, well, first of all, when we saw the bad guys early in the movie, we didn't really mention this, or hit the flunkies, is that they all have uniforms, some of them, or a bunch of them have, they look like some sort of security force. like with the kind of the dark navy clothes and the ball cast. But then they have all these other like Mad Max characters come out of nowhere. And this crazy action piece. Why do their Jeeps have guns, like guns mounted on the top, but they had ones mounted up front on the hood of the car?
Well, they actually had rockets. They had rocket launchers.
They had and they had rocket launchers. They had like the big earth movers that can move as fast as, and they abandoned that super truck pretty quickly.
Well, they were getting squeezed, to be fair.
Well, yeah, I know, but I mean, like, this is not a big action scene. Not really. They really laughed. It was, again, like a very 80s thing where they're driving towards a cliff or a ledge and the rockets shoot and it's a big explosion and the truck goes flying this big giant leap. I'm like, oh my God, that is ridiculous. I did actually kind of laugh when Owen was on the little monitor and he was kind of talking to them or what. I don't know. It sort of made me laugh. It's like, you guys aren't like doing anything like bad to the truck, are you? Or, you know, but it's dumb. It's just so stupid. And I don't think that there was enough payoff. I know there's more action, but the fact that they reveal this truck, you think it's going to be important. And then kind of a lackluster action sequence anyways. And it's like 2 or 3 minutes.
Well, I think it's a bit longer than you're thinking. I think it's like 5 to 7 minutes long, this whole sequence.
Oh, maybe.
Here. You know, from a filmmaking perspective, unless you're going to make the entire thing inside the base with just them two walking in and just having massively long shootouts and fights, you want to create something different from, this is a trope in the building an action movie. So I'm actually glad it's here. How well it's executed is a different story. I do think it starts off with a really good scene between Tango and Cash, because at this point, they're talking about if they don't make it, Tango's being genuine and he's complimenting Cash, saying he's the best cop he's ever worked with. And I love the comeback. Cash says, well, he's not saying if Cash doesn't make it, he's saying, well, if you don't make it, I'm going to date your sister.
Yeah.
and then
I
laughed at that. And then Tango just looks at him and then you just see the big smile and charm oozing out of Cash, like Kurt Russell. I love that scene. It's great. And these guys just have, you know, we've said it before, we'll say it again. I'm sure we're all going to agree at the end. These guys just have such great chemistry together. The only problem with the chase that I don't like is that it's littered with puns after puns. Like, where did this guy learn to drive? Stevie Wonder and all these other things. Like, this is getting to Attack of the Clones C-3PO level bad. And so I didn't like that. I didn't mind some of the action. It's just the puns were bad. The only line I really liked was the comeback from Sly about the gun, because he takes the bigger gun, gives the small gun, and then Cash complains, oh, why am I getting the small one? And he, you know, does the comeback. Genetics, Pee-wee. So he finally, you know, is able to pay back that joke. I enjoyed that. But what was with the big dune buggy? All of a sudden they go, oh shit, and they see a dune buggy coming towards them, and it's like, it's got no guns. It's just a metal frame with some wheels on it, and they're afraid of the dune buggy. I was like shaking my head at that. Some of this stuff didn't make sense, but the one thing that I did laugh at is I love the gas joke. Not because it's a good joke, because Cash says, well, I got good news and bad news. You know, both we're running out of gas. And they just got there. They went straight from Owen's place or wherever that place is to here. And the only thing I could think of was that joke from The Simpsons where McBain's driving the Humvee and he goes, mileage is 1 highway, 0 city. It's the one thing that made me laugh. I thought of that joke. So, but I agree with you. It's a bit of a mixed action scene, but I think it was necessary. A couple of good jokes, but still littered with too many puns. Now let's talk about the inside of the base. So, and they immediately crash in. There's a shootout with some no-name guys, and then they get into the shootout with Quan and Lopez, and then the henchman fights with Ponytail and surprise martial artist guest star, no-name man. So let's not talk about Perrette facing off with Perrette, but just everything in the base, including these fights with the second-to-last stage bosses, as I mentioned.
I think the action is certainly serviceable here. There isn't anything particularly that stands out. It feels like, because we've kind of retreated into some real bad cliches already here, because I think we know that they've got the sister hostage at this point. The puns are, it's a good thing they have such good chemistry, because you're right, that one dumb pun where he's like, where'd you learn how to drive? Stevie Wonder? It's like, really? That's the best you could do? Like, that's pretty terrible. It doesn't have the stakes or the tension that, like, the prison fight scenes had, because those are the high points of the movie. If the third act, this is the culmination of that, it can't outdo what it's done before. It starts to fall a little bit flat. I think they're straining a bit in both the writing and the setup. I mean, okay, so the outside stuff wasn't very good, but the setup inside, there's nothing really going on here that's very interesting or different. It also feels like they have the upper hand through the whole thing. So the tension isn't quite there. You don't feel like the bad guys have his ability to slow them down or to cause really any harm other than a flesh wound. The classic 80s flesh wound, which is great. So, poorly lit, it's dark, can't see very well. So, those are some of the problems that I kind of have with where we're at right now.
Just right. There's no real tension here. It's pretty predictable. I kind of wish that, in Ducat and James Hong there, they got taken out pretty quickly. And I was a little surprised at that. Are we also talking about like the next unknown martial artist guy? We're talking about that too. Cause
yeah. We're talking about these.
I laughed, not because it was intentionally funny, but that guy broke every fucking piece of glass in that office. Like every swing, every kick, he destroyed a piece of glass.
Actually, it's funny. I wrote that down. I said he's doing these axe kicks. Like the kick is coming from above and downwards.
Yes,
and that's really only good for breaking shelves, and that's it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, we got this new stunt guy coming in. He really likes breaking glass. So you got to check out this kick. And they set up the office in like the most absurd way so you can destroy as much glass as possible. And I kind of wish that Ponytail's death had been a little bit more snappy. It felt a little bit flat to me. I did like the idea of like the grenade kind of coming back, but it should be like a little bit more of a tense scene there, and then, but I don't know, it felt a little bit flat. I mean, it's fine. It's predictable. But as far as like, this is really the last action sequence of the whole movie. And it's meh.
Interesting.
Right.
So this is the one aspect I think I'm going to disagree with you guys. I actually really enjoyed this. This scene. I think the only problem here is that it's just a little too short. Like it ends pretty quick. Like I agree with you guys. What's with Quan and Gul Dukat getting killed in 2 seconds? That's like Jedi Council wipeout level. Yeah. Which is pretty pathetic. But I love the parts beforehand. I don't think you guys talked about it. Like when they get inside, there's about a 1 or 2 minute scene where they're still having a shootout with some other no-name guys, and you get the Uzis that you guys were happy about. There's Uzis making an appearance here, staple of the 80s. I love it. And you get actually Cash saving Tango. And I liked some of those scenes there. And then when they get in, with the exception of Chinese guy and Gul Dukat getting wiped out too quick, I liked the fight between the axe kicker, surprise guest star, and Ponytail. It was just too short. Now, we're talking about tension in 80s action movies or any action movie. That in a movie like this, there's not a lot of tension because the good guy's gonna make it out. I just think when you guys are thinking about tension is that the fight probably wasn't structured long enough where the bad guys got their chances to hurt the good guys a little bit more. Because I agree with you guys. The one thing I do agree with is that Tango and Cash dominate the fight for the most part. I think they got 1 or 2 punches in the other guys, and that's it. Yeah, so I think that's just pretty much an issue with just maybe them running out of a budget and not being able to extend this scene. But for what I saw, I loved it. I laughed out loud at the axe kicks. We even got a flying leg kick from the surprise guest star there. A little tribute to Shatner. I even love Sly with the throat chop. That was pretty awesome. Yeah. And then I love the grenade death with the finger. Remember Plan B, asshole? Cash gives back to Ponytail. And that was a fun ending to that character. So those guys are gone. Now we get to Perrette and Mirror, Mirror on the Wall and the ending. So let's talk about Mr. Perrette and his little plan here. He has rigged this place to blow. He has watched the entire infiltration on the outside when they first came in on the outside of the quarry. He's decided to stay, watch. He realizes that they've infiltrated the base afterwards. He still has decided to stay. And he also set an bomb to go off previously, and he's still there. Let's talk about his plan. Let's talk about the Hall of Mirrors, how this is resolved, and the ending on the outside with the heroes.
So even though the action leading up to this, I wasn't really in love with, I did actually kind of like this final scene because it's so ridiculous, but I loved it. I mean, because it's like, man, what is that room even for? It is so insane. It finally kind of like fits. I mean, it's dumb, but it sort of fits.
Nathan, that's the area where he dresses his mice. He needs all the angles.
I see. Okay.
All the angles.
Now let's clear it up. The true victims of that explosion really are the mice because they were probably gone. And the other thing that I thought was, it was kind of, I don't know why I kind of liked it, but he's giving the bad guy monologue and they're both talking to each other, but you can still kind of hear him in the background, but the sound level is low. And I don't know, that kind of made me laugh the way they did that. I was like, oh, this is kind of funny. But, like leading up to this, did they know that she was a hostage?
I mean, well, they did, because when they came in, the ponytail guy had her initially.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Sorry. No, I meant like before that when they were going to.
No.
Okay.
No.
So, but I don't know. Jack Palance's like delivery I thought was really great. And then I kind of liked when they shoot him, they're like, well, how did you know? Well, because the ring was on the other finger or whatever. I can't remember exactly like who knew what. It's so ridiculous, but I kind of liked it. And then again, like another great trope of not just 80s movies, but movies in general. You got 20 seconds, but you're able to like run out of a building and like clear it before it goes like full Hiroshima and you're fine. And then the final, again, like between the three of them, another great scene where they have a lot of great 3-person dialogue, which is, I think, kind of a hard thing to do and do well in a lot of movies and have it like really zippy. The final high five, I thought it was great. But it was one of those things where, we've just we've just committed a giant massacre and we can still kind of make jokes about it. I love that about 80s movies too. It's just like the wanton murder that happens and they can kind of like shrug it off and like, oh yeah. And, like a little wink and a nudge and yeah, we're great cops. We work great together. Now I'm going to date your sister kind of thing. And it's just, and that is this movie to a T.
How about you, Geoff?
Yeah, I never really thought about, obviously the mirror room is absurd, but yeah, why does that guy even have the mirror room? But how they both pop him in the head there. I thought that was a fitting end, even though, and I never thought about it before. I don't know why. Harry, as you said, like he watches them infiltrate the facility. He watches them murder every single mercenary martial artist, bad motherfucker. Doesn't he have, he's got this super villain layer. Doesn't he have like a helicopter or something? He sets the self-destruct? Who is the self-destruct system?
Problem is he's dug himself down into a lower elevation in the rock quarry. So he's got to like dig himself out at this point.
Yeah.
It's like, no.
He's got his mice burrowing a tunnel to China.
Yeah.
So stupid. And the countdown and the place blowing up. I guess it was fitting at that point. I love the high five, probably because nobody has ever before or since high-fived like that ever in history. So goofy. And then the newspaper picture of them
back on the force. Back on the
force. Now, did you guys notice the other headline on the newspaper?
Yes.
No,
I'm glad someone brought this up.
What was it?
There's two of them that are great.
I only saw the one. Ask not what the critics say.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome.
Do you know what the other one was?
No.
Oh.
Children who dress for excess. But ask not what critics say. That was amazing.
That's awesome. What a great little find there. That's a rare antiquity unto itself. Nicely done. Okay, I'm going to have to change my opinion of this ending now. I think that tonally fits completely now. That's great. I didn't like the resolution with Perret, but he's such a dumb villain, so he really deserved to be taken out so quickly. The only thing I liked about this whole thing is that because they are still slightly different people, and they have different thought processes, and I liked how the fact that Tango looked at the ring in the mirror and Cash was looking at the monogram, and that's how they kind of figured out which was the right pane of glass to shoot at. So I did like that. A nice little detail even in the last scene. And I agree with you guys. The dialogue at the end between the three of them. I love how Tango still says, grow up. Just admit it. You got sloppy and you stumbled with the gunshot wound. I thought that's a great line. And then Tango also says later, it's a great line. I love this line. It's like, there's a lot of new pollution in the sky and they name it Perret. I thought that's pretty awesome. So, but yeah, the corny high five I didn't like. Even though, if you guys noticed, they were trying to high five several times previously, and they were always either stopped on their own or they were interrupted. So they finally completed the high five. So maybe in the future, in some movie, Kitster and Greedo can finally finish that one as well. That would be amazing. But I didn't like the newspaper clipping until you guys now mentioned the critics headline here. That's awesome now. I've changed my mind. I love the ending. I love that newspaper ending. Fits completely. So fucking awesome. So that ends Tango and Cash. So before we get into our final thoughts, I just wanted to ask you guys a couple things. Actually, 3 things. Talk about Stallone, because in my opinion, this was, even though he's still playing an action hero, he's still tough as nails, he's got martial arts moves and stuff like that, beat guys up. He's playing slightly a different character than what he's played in many other movies. He's less machismo, slightly more intellectual on a broad level, high level strokes. He doesn't have that low, voice that everyone, tries to imitate that he does for Rocky. He's trying to play it a little differently here. What did you think? Did you like his performance here? Let's also talk about Kurt Russell. We all love Kurt Russell. Do you think this movie would have been radically different? And I think it would have been. Just provide me your comments and thoughts if Patrick Swayze stayed on. Would this movie have been as successful, do you think? And then lastly, because this is the end of the 1980s, is this a proper send-off for action movies and buddy cop films, or just action movies in general of that decade, without kind of giving away your final thoughts?
Oh, wow, that's a tough one. Okay, so Stallone's performance, yeah, I thought his performance worked. You're right, he does play a bit of a different, and not a vast departure from his other action movie roles. I mean, he's still playing a tough guy. Like, he's a cop, and a cop who doesn't play by the rules. He's still a big physical presence, but he does a good job of kind of walking the line between being a little bit more refined, playing a character who does have a little bit more intelligence, is fairly well spoken, and yet can still punch your teeth down through your asshole. So it's a fairly believable, in the context of the movie, it's a believable performance, and it works in the context here. So he does a good job. Kurt Russell is kind of Kurt Russell, That's a good thing, because he has so much charisma, and that grin of his is so charming, and he has such excellent comedic timing. Would this have been a vastly different movie with Patrick Swayze? I mean, shit, yeah, it would have. And I don't think it would have worked nearly as well. And that's, not to say anything against Patrick Swayze, who, very capable actor in his own right, and is also very charming, but probably for lack of a better term, is a little bit prettier than Kurt Russell. Kurt Russell's a little bit more rugged. I thought that fit the role a bit better. And it comes down to chemistry as well. I mean, who knows what kind of chemistry Stallone and Patrick Swayze might have had, because that's what it comes down to. But I think we're definitely looking at a very different film if that's the case. And then to your last question, is this a proper send-off for the decade of the action movie? I don't know. I mean, there are better action movies from the 80s. I mean, it has a lot of fun with a lot of the tropes of the 80s. You talked about it a lot, Harry, and I'm mad at myself for missing it, but I kind of hear it in my mind for not paying better attention to the soundtrack. Very 80s with the synth. That's such a sign of the times. So I don't know that I can answer that question. I hate to be a pussy and sit on the fence, but I don't think I can answer it. It's just not the best. It's not as good as it could be, considering the two leads, right? And the soundtrack's great, and there are some good action scenes. It's just some of it is so ridiculous that it's hard to say, yeah, this is a great send-off for the 80s.
Well, for Stallone, I think he did a really good job. And, looking back on, I'm not as familiar with his career, but sort of looking at when this movie came out in relation to the movies he's already done, I think at the time, this would have been considered as okay, he's trying to, stretch himself a little bit as an actor ever so slightly. I mean, it's still, his type of movie. And I think as far as, Kurt Russell is great. I don't want to say Kurt Russell was phoning it in necessarily. I mean, he's a pro, but I think he just showing up and saying, I'm just going to have fun with this. Right. So I don't think he was really trying that hard, where contrast to Stallone, who, he's probably a guy with maybe, especially at this era, bit of an ego. So he's like, I got a certain image I want to maintain, but he wants to try and do something a little bit different, even though he's not really coloring outside the lines that much. Yeah, and I don't know if this would have worked with Patrick Swayze. Would have had the same hair as Kurt Russell, right? I mean, I think his hair is pretty glorious in Roadhouse, which you said he left this for. But I don't know if he would have, again, we don't know what the chemistry would that look like. I don't really think of Patrick Swayze as a guy with a great, or doesn't deliver a lot of comedic lines a lot the way Kurt Russell can. So I wonder what that interplay would have been like. And I think because of the different tones and shifts of this movie, I wonder if that would have almost been, again, another weird, jarring, strange, weird thing with you have like this guy who's not really playing the straight man to Stallone's straight man. So tough to kind of say. And, is this a great send-off? Well, it has a lot of great things about the 80s that I like, some of the tropes, but unfortunately it falls into parody at times that I'm not sure that I think it is a fun movie of the era. And I think it's a good representation of many things of the era, but I don't know if can say that it really is a great send-off. Could have been far worse, that's for sure, given the production quandaries. Like Geoff, I don't want to be on the fence about it, but I think I kind of lean towards no, I don't really think this is a great send-off.
Okay, I agree with you guys partially, but I do have some different opinions. I agree with you that I think Patrick Swayze definitely would have been jarring in this role, and it would have been a radically different movie. Of course, I agree. Who knows how much of a chemistry he would have had with Sly that may have worked, may not have worked. I would agree with you, Nathan. I would lean towards it definitely probably would not have worked, because I don't really see Patrick Swayze in this type of role where he's a little bit more lighthearted. He's more serious, dramatic kind of guy. And that's where I'm going to go towards Sly, that's why I think Kurt Russell did such a great job here. He was just, we talked about oozing charisma out of his hair. Every orifice of his body, I guess Sly would know in the shower scene was probably oozing charisma. But I think Sly did a good job. I freely admit I'm a little biased when it comes to Sly, but because I did grow up a big fan and I'm still a big fan, who I think he gets a bad rap. I think here he really lets loose. He really, to me, demonstrates that he has the ability to be in a movie like this and more of a comedic tone, playing somewhat of a slightly more intellectual range than some of his more famous roles. Less, in a less serious way. It's a different type of movie, different type of genre. And I think he pulled it off really well. Their chemistry makes this movie shine. And I disagree with you guys fully. I think this is a very good send-off to the 80s. This is an 80s movie in a nutshell. By hook or by crook, they got this movie made considering all the production problems. I think it's lightning in a bottle kind of thing. It's like, how Superman was able to kind of finish considering all the production problems they had. Same thing with Star Wars. I actually think this is a lightning in a bottle kind of movie, especially now knowing all that happened behind the scenes. And for them to pull this off, it's amazing. And it's not just because they managed to complete the film and there are good aspects to it. I think I had a lot of fun here. All the stereotypes and tropes of an 80s action movie are in here. Now, is it the best action movie of the 80s? No. But when I compare this to, I think it's pretty on par with Lethal Weapon, the original. I think it's leaps and bounds better than any of the Lethal Weapon sequels. I think it's better than another buddy cop comedy out there, 48 Hours or Another 48 Hours. Those are terrible compared to this, in my opinion, for different reasons. There are good aspects to each of these movies other movies I'm talking about. But I think, is this as good as Predator, Die Hard, Rambo, First Blood? Obviously not. No comparison. But considering all the tropes that were in every single 80s action movies, now you look at all the Van Dammes, the Seagals, the Chuck Norris movies, and all the other ones that Arnie, Sly, or Bruce Willis did during this decade, everything is kind of wrapped perfectly here. I think it's a great send-off. That's just my opinion. Do you guys have any other comments before we get into our recommendations?
When I looked up the last newspaper just to confirm one of the headlines, you guys should just go look it up. There's a fake Tango and Cash newspaper. Jack Palance sniffs rodent. It's like Mr. Nibbles is said to be in shocked but stable condition, and the picture is amazing. So go Google it. You won't be sorry you did it. That's all I got.
The standout is the buddy cop chemistry between Kurt Russell and Sylvester Stallone. I mean, the movie right here. I mean, for all of the tropes or not, or the 80s synth or every other thing that we've talked about, it's those two that make this work at all. I mean, if it wasn't for that, this movie is probably a colossal turd. And for those two, that's an unlikely pair for me to have put in a movie. If I'm thinking back to the 80s, I wouldn't have thought to team up Stallone and Kurt Russell. That wouldn't have occurred to me at all. And it only occurred once to Hollywood. So it works, well, I guess maybe twice with upcoming Guardians of the Galaxy, but it's almost too good to be true how good they are together. That's fucking fantastic.
I 100% agree. I mean, the real standout stuff is the chemistry between those two. Even just when they're doing stuff on their own, they're really great. Jack Palance, I think, is really good. I mean, overall, all the performances. Like, everyone equips themselves pretty well in this movie, I think, even down to some of the smaller players, I thought. The other thing that I liked, the flow of the movie. Like I've said, I can forgive a lot in a movie except for being boring. And this movie is anything but boring. And I think it's like a real credit to this film is that, like, oh, boom, boom, we're going. And they appropriately placed the scenes where they need to slow down a little bit so that people can kind of catch up. So it's a very well-paced film overall. And I mean, I think as far as like just the overall, well, I guess we can kind of get into final thoughts later, but I mean, those are kind of the big things that I really enjoy.
So how about we move into the final thoughts and recommendations? Nathan, how about you start us off first? Do you recommend Tango and Cash? Is it also a rare antiquity?
Yes. I'm actually going to go and buy this movie now, I think, because I just got more excited talking about it with you guys. I did say it's maybe not necessarily a great send-off, but I think now, like after this viewing and talking about it more, I think this is probably top 5 action films of the 80s for me. It's sort of within this genre, like Predator notwithstanding, but sort of the buddy cop sort of thing. And I think even better than some of the stuff that comes later. You know, even though Tango and Cash kind of becomes a little bit of a punchline at times, this is, I think, a really, really good movie.
How about you, Geoff?
You know, I do own this movie, but I own this movie on, I don't know if you guys remember those shitty DVDs that had like the plastic.
Oh, I have that.
It was the Warner Brothers.
That's what I have.
Yeah, you got that too?
Yeah.
But it's not. It was before they had anamorphic widescreen, so
I know.
You played on a big screen TV.
Yeah, it comes out small.
Yeah, it's a tiny little rectangle, right?
I hate that. I want to buy the Blu-ray, but I can't find it. I got to order it online.
Yeah, totally. So I watched it on that, and I was just shocked and horrified at the picture and audio quality. But I feel the same as Nathan. I mean, I wasn't sure about some of it, but yeah, just talking about it and all the things that I missed, I mean, I would have absolutely recommended this no matter what before we had the conversation. It's pretty ridiculous, but Sly and Kurt Russell are worth the price of admission just by themselves. Everything in the prison, start to finish, is gold. Yeah, the third act is a little bit ridiculous, but they certainly don't make them like this anymore. So, yeah, this is definitely a rare antiquity for me.
I'm 100% agree, guys. This is very high recommend. It's always been one of my favorites, and even if I'm looking at it through rose-tinted glasses, I can still see the strengths and weaknesses of this film. As I mentioned, maybe by sheer dumb luck, this movie came together, and it came together even if it was mashed together in a poor managerial way. I think it all works. And then mainly, as we talked about, between the chemistry between the two leads. But I love the action. I love the score. I love the settings. The prison sequence is amazing. I love the intro, the setup. I even like the third act. It's not the best of all the third acts, but in 80s action movies, it's very hard to nail an amazing third act as well. Even in other types of movies, third acts are really, as we've talked about, Geoff, numerous times, third acts are really hard to wrap a movie up in a perfect way. So, I mean, no movie is perfect, but considering the genre, you can't take it too seriously. And because this movie is so funny and it's so ridiculous, it all works. And this is not a movie that's so bad it's good. It's actually good. And it's bad and it's good. I don't know. It's not one of those, Batman and Robin scenarios where it's so bad you have to watch it because, oh my God, it's so bad, it's become good. This is actually legitimately good. Kudos to both Sly and Kurt Russell and, the trio or directors that names were attached to this film. And maybe John Peters' weirdo influence helped shape this into the gem that it is. Hit all the right marks. Perfect representation of the buddy cop genre. I love Sly and Kurt Russell just as much as Mel Gibson and Danny Glover. I think there's a bit more depth when it comes to Martin Riggs' character. Of course, I'll freely admit that, but I love them, and I think it's too bad we never got Tango and Cash 2. High recommend. One of the highest ones on the podcast so far for me, and a definite rare antiquity, because it's a shame more people do not know of this movie or will give it a chance to watch. I don't think it's widely appreciated in my opinion. But I think we're all on the same board, so that's great. So that does it for today's episode 28, Tango and Cash. Geoff, can you please enlighten us what you have in store for us next?
Yeah, so for episode 29, we're going to do another first on the show. We're going to do the Transformers, not the Michael Bay Turd Fest. I'm talking about the Transformers from 1986, the theatrical animated film, our first animated film on the show, and we'll go back to when they actually were cool. So that's next up. You didn't have to look at Shia LaBeouf for 2.5
Yeah, I was going to say,
hours.
there's no, the beef is not going to make his presence.
beef.
So
No beef, no Marky Mark, baby. Just giant robots shooting laser beams.
Oh, awesome. Can't wait. Thank you guys for recording this one. It was a nice long one talking about great Tango and Cash. Nathan, thank you very much for joining us tonight. And Geoff, always a pleasure. We'll see you next time.
All right, man. Talk to you next time.
See ya.
Mr. Perret, this is most disturbing. I think we must take some action.
There you go, thinking again. Oh, Mr. Perret, I insist.
Don't insist!
Insistent people make me angry. Everything is under control. Oh, you're beautiful.